Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Diogo Goncalves. Albufeira, a beautiful resort town, is one of the most visited places in the Algarve region of southern Portugal. It was there, in 1999, that Diogo was born. He is the only child of a poor but hard-working family whose income mainly depended on the of tourism. Diogo's parents saw him as a good son, and those who knew him described him as decent, responsible, hardworking, and reliable. He was also a very outgoing young man who loved being surrounded by friends and family. Diogo went to high school in his hometown. After graduating, he started studying computer science. To fund his education and support his family, he got a job at McDonald's in 2015 when he was just 16. At 17, while still working there, his life became miserable when his father suffered a stroke and fell into a vegetative state, as reported by the media. That same year, while Diogo and his mother were dealing with his father's health crisis, another tragedy struck. His mother, who had always supported his learning and growth, was hit by a car on her way to work at the mall, where she cleaned. The car dragged her several meters, leading to her falling into a ditch where she died from her injuries. Although the driver fled, but the police identified him and he faced trial. While he was waiting for the conviction of the person responsible for his parents' suffering, Diogo needed to be transferred to a medical unit where he received the necessary care. His maternal aunt, worried about his situation, had suggested that he move in with her. However, they had a serious disagreement, and after a few weeks, it became impossible for them to continue living together. Diogo explained what was happening to his friend, who offered him a room in his house in the Aldea neighborhood, also in Albufeira. At the time, the closeness to the friend's relatives helped Diogo feel at home. Despite his young age, Diogo demonstrated great ability to handle and overcome difficult situations with patience and optimism. In 2017, at just 18 years old, Diogo graduated with a degree in computer technology and completed a 6-month internship at Vila Vida Park, a leading 5-star hotel. His impressive work led the executives to offer him a position as a technician. In 2018, Diogo accepted the offer and left his job at a fast food restaurant chain, where he had worked for nearly a year and had become a duty manager. This thing a new chapter in his life, filled with opportunities to advance after overcoming difficult times. After working at the company for some time and anticipating better days ahead, he decided to buy a car. Diogo got along well with his co-workers, especially Maria Malvero, a 19-year-old security guard at the hotel. Maria, like Diogo, comes from a family with difficult circumstances and faces her own challenges. Her mother had mental health issues, and her father left when she was very young. She never spoke to him again. Maria, interested in martial arts, practiced karate and aspired to be a police officer. However, her application to the police academy was rejected due to her tattoo. Disappointed, she decided to study at Securinfo, a company that trains security guards in various private security fields. Diogo was interested in Maria and made his feelings known from the start, but she did not feel the same way and treated him coldly. Fabio Acosta, a close friend of Diogo, said that Diogo was deeply in love with Maria. He was so infatuated that he declined a well-paying job offer from the Sheraton hotel chain in Lisbon because he didn't want to be away from her. Additionally, he would bring her meals when she was working. Over time, they became very close, and people around them assumed they were a couple. However, there was no romantic relationship between them. Maria told Diogo she didn't want anything to do with him because she had just ended a toxic relationship with a naval officer, yet she was still giving him false hopes. Diogo never gave up hope for a future with Maria and sought opportunities to be near her and make her happy in various ways. One day, he was deeply disappointed when he saw a video on social media of Maria kissing another girl. Diogo was upset because he believed she should have told him that she wasn't interested in men and that this was why they could never be together. Fabio, Diogo's best friend, tried to reassure him by saying that girls often do this, but Diogo was not convinced. He insisted that she had lied to him and that was why she had rejected him. Despite the disappointment, Diogo and Maria stayed friends, and she continued to accept his gifts and invitations for dates. Several times, Diogo offered to walk her home, but she always said her roommate had a jealous boyfriend and she didn't want to bring another man into the apartment. As time went on, in December 2019, Diogo learned that he would finally receive compensation for his mother's death, which had occurred 3 years earlier. After receiving the payment amount of up to 70,000 euros, Diogo decided it was time to buy a house to avoid continuing to pay rent. He shared the good news with his friend Maria, who left her job at the hotel a few weeks later. Maria stated that she could no longer stand the colleagues' comments about the relationship between her and Diogo. She also explained that she wanted to spend more time with her mother, who needed a lot of attention due to a mental illness. At that moment, there was no reason to doubt her words. However, subsequent incidents suggest that her decision to leave the hotel was motivated by dark reasons, and this is where the third character in the story, Mariana Fonseca, 20 years old, comes in. Mariana worked as a nurse at the hospital and had a dear relationship with Maria. They both lived together in Mariana's parents' house, because they still do not have enough money to have their own home where they could enjoy their relationship. When Maria discovered the substantial amount of money Diogo, she started getting closer to he. It seems Maria shared this information with Mariana, and they decide to trick Diogo in order to gain access to his bank account and steal the compensation money. After Maria repeatedly refused to date Diogo, one day, she told him she wanted to spend a romantic evening with him. This was a significant surprise for Diogo, who was overjoyed and couldn't believe his luck. After waiting for so long, he was ecstatic about finally being with the girl he loved. They planned the meeting for Friday evening, March 20th, 2020. Diogo was thrilled and didn't question why Maria had suddenly changed her mind. Maria and Mariana had different accounts of the incident that day, but here are the facts according to media reports based on official information. When Diogo entered, Maria offered him some orange juice she had brought. However, the drink contained an unexpected ingredient, diindawomethane, DIM, a drug affecting the central nervous system, with analgesic and sedative properties. Maria using the drug, which she had stolen from the hospital. Her plan was to sedate Diogo, access his banking information, and manipulate his fingers to unlock his phone. Mariana waited in a car outside while Maria executed the plan. Mariana even texted she several times to check if the drug had taken effect, as it was taking longer than expected. The situation inside the house became increasingly more tense. Diogo didn't understand what was happening and started to feel anxious. Maria then tries to calm him down by promising to show him an erotic dance, but first she has to tie him to a table. After being restrained for a few minutes, Diogo panicked and asked Maria to release him, but she became aggressive, leading to a struggle. Using her martial arts skills, she subdued Diogo by knocking him to the floor and choking him, prevent him from breathing. According to Mariana's testimony, Maria later instructed her to enter the apartment. Upon entering, Mariana found Diogo on the floor. She questioned Maria about the incident and criticized her for going beyond their plans, which was to steal his keys and take his money. Seeing Diogo unresponsive, Mariana began resuscitation efforts. When he woke up, he was extremely agitated and attempted to attack she. It seems he realized that Mariana was plotting against him, led him to try to defend himself. In response to Diogo's aggression towards Mariana, Maria intervened by grabbing him from behind, bringing him to the ground, and restraining him by squeezing his neck again. Diogo's life ended tragically at the hands of the girl he loved, Maria. His body was found in the living room of Maria and Mariana's house, where they continued with their planned robbery. They first severed his thumb and index finger to unlock his phone, access a mobile payment app, and transfer money. This process took several days because there was a limit on the amount that could be transferred each day. When he learned that Diogo had work scheduled the next day, Mariana and Maria tried to prevent his colleagues from noticing his absence, searching for him, and reporting him missing. One of Diogo's colleagues received a text from his number stating that he couldn't make it to work that day and needed someone to cover for him. Diogo's colleague, who disliked last-minute shift changes, found the request odd. Diogo asked if everything was okay and received a simple yes in response. The conversation among Diogo's co-worker and others continued throughout Friday and part of Saturday, but the unusual messages increasingly seemed uncharacteristic of him. One person receiving these messages was Diogo's supervisor. One message said that Diogo wouldn't be returning to work because he had met a woman in France and planned to move in with her. This explanation seemed odd to the supervisor because Diogo was a responsible employee and wouldn't leave his job so abruptly. To find the answer, the supervisor attempted to call Diogo but received no answer. Later, he got a message stating that Diogo was not in to talk on the phone. The supervisor responded, saying he could only feel reassured if they spoke. He wanted to hear Diogo's voice and wanted to know what was happening. Diogo's loved ones reacted to messages sent by Maria and Mariana, in which they pretended to be Diogo. This prompted they to alter their plan for explaining Diogo's sudden disappearance. They decided to make it appear as if Diogo had ended his life and planned to dismember his body to get rid of the evidence. Maria later mentioned that their actions were inspired by the TV show Dexter, featuring a forensic scientist who killed criminals and disguised his crimes by dismembering their bodies. After executing their horrific plan, Mariana and Maria placed Diogo's body in trash bags in the trunk of their car. They then went to an ATM and shopped at a mall, where they were seen hugging and laughing on security cameras. Following this, they returned to Mariana's home to begin dismembering Diogo's body. Ultimately, they put Diogo's torso in a black bag and discarded the other parts in a container. Meanwhile, Diogo's friends launched a campaign to report him as missing and reached out to the authorities. The authorities then waited the required 48 hours before officially declaring him missing. Mariana and Maria left the house, with Maria getting into Diogo's car to drive to a cliff near the Cabo de São Vicente lighthouse. Mariana followed behind in her own car. Around 2 p.m. that day, Mariana threw Diogo's torso off the cliff and abandoned his car nearby. They planned to make it seem like he had jumped voluntarily. However, instead of falling into the sea, the remains got stuck on a rock. Finally, Mariana and Maria drove together in Mariana's car for about 12 minutes, covering 7 kilometers, to the Inferno Dago waterfall in Tavira, where they disposed of the rest of Diogo's body in the water. Shortly after, Diogo's car was discovered in a parking lot near the Cabo de São Vicente lighthouse. A newspaper report stated that 2 laptops were found inside the car, led forensic police to investigate. A land and sea search was launched, leading to the discovery of a young man's torso partially covered by a black garbage bag. Meanwhile, at another location along the coast, a French couple found the young man's head at Inferno Toigo. Diogo's hands and feet were later recovered during an intensive police search. The investigators assigned to the case found the details surrounding Diogo's death unusual. They noted that he was a quiet man who don't hang out with bad people. As the police continued their investigation, they discovered that Diogo had received a significant payout following his mother's death. While examining money orders, they found that a large sum had been transferred from Diogo's account to someone named Maria. Naturally, the detectives' next move was to locate Maria to understand why she had received money from Diogo. Maria attempted to persuade the police that she killed Diogo in self-defense, claiming he was trying to abuse her. She stated that this was why she had left the hotel prior to the incident. However, a review of the text messages between Diogo and Maria, they showed that her claims were false. After Maria stopped working, she and Diogo grew close. During her initial meeting with the police, Maria insisted that she was entirely responsible for planning and carrying out the incident that led to the shooting. Maria clarified that Mariana was not involved in the crime at all. However, Mariana's account of the incident contradicted what Maria's claimed. Mariana reported that Maria to wanting to steal Diogo's money and intended to kill him. She stated that Maria's plan was to make him suffer in order to extract his bank account password. Investigators gathered enough evidence to convict both girls, Mariana and Maria, including phone records, the Diogo's cell phone, and ATM surveillance footage. Maria and Mariana were arrested on April 1, 2020, and faced court in June of that year. The judge carefully reviewed the incidents that Maria described. Maria remained steadfast in her confession and denied any involvement Mariana's. She stated that Diogo's body was in a suitcase in a car parked in the garage for 2 days, and it was there that the dismemberment took place, while Mariana's family was sleeping. After hearing Maria's detailed testimony about the incidents, the judge repeatedly asked her Mariana was during the dismemberment, as which had been done with surgical precision at the joints. All attention in the courtroom turned to the nurse, Mariana. She anticipated the questions and clarified that, since everyone was aware of her employment at the hospital, they mistakenly thought she was responsible for dismembering the corpse. She said that dismemberment could easily be done by using information on the internet. The judge imposed a detention order on both Mariana and Maria, citing that they had committed a serious crime in a creepy, calculated, reckless, and extremely brutal manner. A few months later, on February 24, 2021, the trial began. During her testimony on February 26, 2021, Maria claimed that she initially wanted revenge on Diogo because he had abused her, but did not intend to kill him. She admitted that her goal was to humiliate him and clarified that Mariana had no relationship with Diogo. Mariana and Maria attended court together but did not make eye contact during the trial. It is rumored that after the arrest and subsequent jail time, they decided to end their friendship. The trial included testimonies from several witnesses, including forensic expert Teresa Costa. She explained that the level of diphenhydramine found in Diogo's blood was much lower than expected from the 3 ampoules, suggesting that he either did not take the prescribed dose or had taken it many hours before his death. On April 27, 2021, the court delivered its verdict. Maria Malvero was convicted of several serious crimes, including aggravated murder, destroy the body, robbery, unauthorized access, fraud, carjacking, and possession of an illegal weapon. As a result, she received a 25-year prison sentence and was ordered to pay €265,000 in compensation to Diogo's father. Mariana Fonseca, on the other hand, was acquitted of murder but found guilty of destroy the body, complicity, and fraud. She received a 4-year prison sentence but was released because none of her convictions required pre-trial detention, at least until the final sentencing. The court determined that Mariana's effort to save life Diogo indicated that she did not intend to kill him. The judge based his decision on a confession from she, in which she accepted full responsibility for her actions. However, this verdict was not accepted by the Portuguese public, who viewed Mariana as equally guilty of the serious crime against Diogo alongside Maria. After the verdict, Mariana exited the courtroom through a separate exit where her father, who had attended all the hearings, was waiting. Neither of them spoke to the media. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Sarah Pappenheim. Sarah Pappenheim was born on January 30th, 1997, in Minnesota. She was the second child of Donnie Odegaard and Jerry Pappenheim, with an older brother named Josh. The siblings developed a strong bond as they grew older. When Sarah was in second grade, her family relocated from Minneapolis to Redding, California. She graduated from Foothill High School in 2015, where she was an active member of the school band and played the drums. Sarah was passionate about music, especially drumming. She was a skilled drummer and regularly played at jam sessions in Redding. As one of the few female drummers, she stood out on stage. When Sarah was 18, she moved back to her hometown in Minnesota with her mother and brother after her parents got divorced. There, she continued to play drums at different venues and eventually met Bernard Allison, a famous blues guitarist and singer. Allison was impressed with her skills and invited her to join him on stage occasionally. By the time Sarah turned 19, she had become a local celebrity among blues fans, known for her bright smile, which earned her the nickname Ronald McDonald. Meanwhile, her brother Josh was struggling with depression and mental health issues after their parents' divorce. Tragically, on an ordinary day in February 2016, the police arrived at their doorstep and delivered devastating news to Sarah's mother. Josh took his own life at the age of 20, leaving his loved ones, especially his mother Sarah, heartbroken. The bond between Sarah and Josh was incredibly strong, and his passing devastated her. To cope with her loss and to help others who struggle with mental health, Sarah decided to study psychology. She had been in touch with Nico Carson Major, who lived in the Netherlands, and she moved there to pursue her studies. At Erasmus University in Rotterdam, Sarah began her psychology program with Nico's support, who not only helped her navigate her grief but also assisted her with her studies as a native speaker. Sarah's passion for music never faded despite her focus on studies and work. She stayed in touch with Bernard Allison, a musician she had performed with, and shared her dream of buying a drum kit. In January 2017, Bernard's band toured Europe, and on Sarah's 20th birthday, January 30th, she attended Bernard's concert in Germany with Nico. Bernard spotted her in the audience, invited her on stage, and let her play the drums with them, just like old times. Sarah lived on the third floor of an apartment complex near the university in Rotterdam. As 2018 drew to a close, she planned to spend Christmas in the United States and booked a flight for a week before New Year's Eve. However, on December 12th, her life took a devastating turn. When a police officer appeared at her doorstep, just like in 2016 when her son had passed away, Sarah's legs began to shake. She instinctively knew what the officer was about to tell her, but couldn't bear the thought of losing another loved one. When the officer informed Sarah's mother that her daughter had passed away, she was overcome with grief and lost consciousness. This devastating news came just a year after the loss of her son, who had died at the age of 20. Sarah was only 21 years old. Sarah lived in a student complex on the third floor, where she rented an apartment with her roommate, Joel Schelling. Joel was also a musician, and music was the common interest that brought them together. Unlike Sarah, who was outgoing and always smiling, Joel was more reserved and had a temper. Despite their occasional quarrels, Sarah remained a supportive friend to Joel, often calming him down when he became angry. However, the situation took a turn for the worse over time. Just 6 days before her death, Sarah confided in her friend Adam Pryor that she was afraid of Joel, who had threatened to harm 3 people he disliked. Sarah knew she had to go to the police. Just a couple of days before her death, she had spoken to her mother on the phone about her concerns. Sarah's roommate, Joel, was behaving in a way that was increasingly bothering her. Her mother advised her to find a new place to live as soon as possible and to avoid Joel until she could move out. On December 12, 2018, at 12:20 p.m., the police received a call from Sarah and Joel's next-door neighbors, who reported hearing a loud fight and then Sarah screaming. When the police arrived, they found Sarah lying on the floor with multiple stab wounds. Despite attempts to revive her, Sarah died from her injuries. The police immediately began searching for Joel, who was nowhere to be found. Neighbors reported that he had left the apartment in a hurry, taking a large double bass with him. This distinctive instrument became a key detail in the police's description of Joel. Less than 2 hours after the crime, 23-year-old Joel Schelling was arrested at Eindhoven train station, about 60 miles from Rotterdam. He was on his way to visit his parents, who lived in Eindhoven. After Joel was arrested, he made a shocking confession to his mother while on the train. He told her that he had taken Sarah's life. The judge subsequently placed Joel under arrest for 14 days to undergo a psychiatric evaluation. Meanwhile, forensic experts conducting the autopsy on Sarah's body found 27 stab wounds, with several of them on her neck, abdomen, and back. 2 days after Sarah passed away, her mother, Doni Odegaard, traveled to the Netherlands to arrange for her daughter's body to be returned home. However, this required raising $40,000, a task that was made possible by the generosity of strangers who cared for the family. Upon learning of Joel's arrest, Doni Odegaard inquired if her daughter had contacted the police. Sarah had instead reached out to social workers, who visited Joel and found him calm. However, the next day, Sarah again contacted social services due to Joel's erratic behavior, including hitting himself with a hammer and threatening to harm multiple people. The case against Schelling began in March 2019. Schelling was accused of causing Sarah Pappenheim's death and admitted his guilt. However, he claimed he did not remember the actual act of taking her life. According to Schelling, he recalled fighting with Sarah, but his next memory was of being in the shower, cleaning himself. Sarah's mother, Doni Odegaard, attended each hearing, relying on an interpreter to understand the proceedings. During the trial, Schelling stated that he suffered from delirium and heard voices in his head. However, when asked if these voices had instructed him to fight with Sarah, Schelling said he did not know and could not recall. He also could not remember the cause of their fight. Prior to the verdict, experts testified that Schelling suffered from multiple disorders and required long-term treatment. Despite this, they concluded that Schelling was responsible for Sarah's death. The verdict was announced in December 2019. Sarah Pappenheim's death occurred before she could receive a response to her second request for support, after her initial request for assistance from social workers went unresponded due to the specialist's unavailability. The medics concluded that Schelling was aware of the initial fight and scuffle with Sarah and had the opportunity to either stop the altercation or grab the knife. By choosing the latter, he should be held accountable for his actions. The prosecutor requested a 10-year prison sentence, but the judge in Rotterdam gave Schelling a 6-year prison term, followed by an indefinite sentence in a psychiatric hospital. The court reduced the sentence from 10 years due to Schelling's relatively young age and his significantly diminished mental capacity at the time of the crime. This means that the court did not consider Schelling fully responsible for his actions. When handing down the sentence, the court released a detailed explanation stating that, although the crime was severe and unpredictable, Schelling's serious psychological disorders made it likely that he would commit another violent crime. The court noted that Schelling suffers from chronic psychological disorders that require ongoing treatment in a clinical setting. The court viewed psychiatric detention as a punitive measure for Schelling, who has expressed a willingness to undergo treatment for depression and other disorders. The court has ruled that Schelling will remain in treatment until it determines he is well enough to be released. The court will review his status every 2 years. Additionally, Schelling has been ordered to pay €68,700 in compensation to Sarah's family. Doni Odegaard is outraged by the sentence, believing it is too lenient. She thinks Schelling should have received a minimum sentence of 10 years in prison. In her opinion, Schelling would have faced a much harsher sentence in the US, such as life imprisonment or the death penalty, which would have prevented him from committing a similar crime in the future. She is also concerned that Schelling may be eligible for parole in as little as 4 years and vowed to do everything in her power to keep him behind bars. An investigation was also conducted into the social workers who had interacted with Sarah. The investigation concluded that the social workers could not be held accountable for failing to identify Schelling's disorders because they did not possess the necessary expertise to make such a diagnosis. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Christina Carlin Craft. Christina Rose Carlin Craft was born on November 11, 1983, in southern New Jersey, to Stuart Craft and Dawn Carlin. From a young age, she enjoyed being in front of the camera, whether it was being photographed or videotaped. After graduating from high school in Linwood in 2000, Christina worked as a waitress in southern New Jersey and later at the Borgata Hotel Casino and Spa in Atlantic City. Although she had a stable job, her true aspiration was to become a model. Christina's determination eventually paid off, and she achieved some success in the modeling industry. In her promotional materials, she expressed her love for posing in elegant lingerie and swimwear. According to Eva Waltz, a friend Christina met while working on a 3-day photo shoot for Maxim magazine, Christina was a charming and beautiful person with a great sense of humor. With her dark hair and blue eyes, she embodied the qualities of a fashion model. Christina's ultimate goal was to appear on the cover of Playboy. In 2003, while still working as a waitress at the Borgata Casino, Christina met Alex Caiatelli, and they soon began dating. Alex supports Christina's ambitions and never hindered her career. They got engaged after a long relationship. During this time, Christina became Cyber Girl of the Month in May 2009, earning an invitation to the Playboy Mansion, where she attended exclusive events and experienced luxury. At the height of her career, Christina's ambitions soared, particularly after meeting Hugh Hefner. Unfortunately, despite her efforts, she failed to secure a modeling contract with Playboy magazine, a highly competitive opportunity that only one girl among thousands of applicants can attain. Christina faced significant obstacles in becoming a top model at that time. One major issue was her age. At 26, she was considered too old for certain magazines that typically feature younger models. Despite this, she continued to work hard, landing jobs with prominent companies like Redken, Maxim, Victoria's Secret, and Vanity Fair. Determined to advance her career, Christina moved to New York with her boyfriend Alex. However, her decision to pose for Playboy proved to be a setback. Many brands were hesitant to work with her after the explicit photo shoot, and her career began to decline. Eventually, it came to a complete halt. It was a challenging time for Christina, but she was grateful to have Alex's support to help her through it. Christina was a woman known for both her physical beauty and her controversial behavior. In 2016, she caused a disturbance at the Smith, a New York restaurant. Following the incident, the New York Post published several articles about what had happened. According to law enforcement sources and court documents, Christina Carlin Craft, 34, was dining at the Smith with a male friend on March 6 when an argument broke out over the bill. The man refused to pay, and the manager, Sergei Anikin, intervened. Christina, who was reportedly intoxicated, claimed the manager had pushed her, but a video of the incident showed that was not true. During the altercation, Christina allegedly hit a police officer on the neck, causing redness and significant pain. She was subsequently charged with misdemeanor assault, attempted assault, and harassment. However, after the district attorney offered her a deal, the charges were dropped on the condition that she stayed out of trouble for 6 months. Christina's lawyer explained that she accepted a reasonable deal offered by the district attorney. Christina had always been fond of Philadelphia, particularly Ardmore, where she felt a strong sense of safety. Considering this, Alex purchased an apartment for her in Ardmore, and they of them relocated to Pennsylvania in 2018. However, Christina soon discovered that Ardmore did not live up to her expectations of being a safe haven. In fact, on August 18, 2018, she reported a robbery to the police. Christina spent the evening at a bar in Philadelphia, but her memories of the night are hazy. The next morning, she woke up with no recollection of how she got home or if anyone was with her. She suspected that someone had drugged her with illegal substances. Feeling scared, she confided in others about her concerns. Her partner, Alex, was away on a business trip at the time, which added to her anxiety. The police investigation into the incident uncovered CCTV footage that showed a car arriving at Christina's apartment building around 3 a.m. The footage revealed that Christina was unconscious in the back seat. The driver, who was later identified as the perpetrator, took Christina's keys from her purse and entered her apartment. Once inside, the thief stole over $50,000 worth of valuables, including jewelry, designer handbags, sunglasses, a credit card, and personal documents. The perpetrator spent about an hour and a half in Christina's apartment before returning to the car. He then helped Christina out of the vehicle and into her apartment building, leaving her in the hallway. The thief put the keys back in Christina's purse and drove away, leaving her disoriented and frightened. The police were able to identify the perpetrator of the robbery with the help of a credit card statement. The culprit was Andre Melton, a man with a prior criminal record. At the time of the robbery, Melton was driving a rented 2018 Kia Sorento with a Virginia license plate. Witnesses reported seeing the same car near Christina's house on August 17, a sighting confirmed by police using specialized license plate recognition software. As the police searched for Melton and worked to recover Christina's stolen belongings, a far more serious crime occurred. On August 22, 2018, Alex Cayatelli called the police to ask them to check on his girlfriend, Christina Carlin Craft, as he was unable to contact her. When he arrived home, he found the apartment door locked from the inside. A review of the security system revealed that someone had opened the front door and balcony door overnight. The police were forced to break down the front door to gain entry. Upon entering the apartment, they immediately discovered a crime scene, with a body on the bed covered in a blanket and blood visible. Christina Carlin Craft's brutally beaten body was discovered under a blanket. She had suffered severe injuries, including a broken nose and strangulation marks on her neck. When Christina's identity was confirmed, the news of her death was devastating to Alex. As the police investigated further, they couldn't rule out the possibility that Alex might be involved in her murder. After all, the closest people to the victim are often the prime suspects. Christina and Alex had a long history together, and anything could have happened between them. The fact that Alex had called the police to express his concern about Christina, only to have her body discovered shortly after, raised suspicions. It was possible that Alex had staged his concern to divert attention from himself. The detectives asked him to accompany them to the police station for questioning, and Alex agreed without hesitation. Alex told investigators he had to return to New York for urgent work on August 21. On August 22, at 2:30 a.m., he called Christina to say goodnight, but she didn't answer. Since Christina was always awake at that hour, Alex grew concerned. He called her several more times, but got no response. He then checked the security system and found suspicious activity at the apartment that night. Alex decided to put his business on hold and return to Ardmore immediately. The police believed Alex's story and ruled him out as a suspect, as it was impossible for him to be in two places at once. His alibi checked out, and the police cleared him of any involvement in Christina's death. The main suspect in Christina's murder was initially Andre Melton, who had previously stolen valuables from her apartment. It's possible that he returned to the apartment to steal again, but his plan was foiled when Christina caught him. Alternatively, he may have discovered that she had reported him to the police and sought revenge. On August 22, the day Christina's body was discovered, the police obtained an arrest warrant for Andre Melton. When they went to his residence, they found some of Christina's belongings, but Melton was nowhere to be found. However, surveillance footage from the night of the crime revealed that Christina had returned to her apartment with an unknown man at 3:08 a.m., but it wasn't Andre Melton. Further analysis of the footage showed that the unknown man did not leave the apartment. To investigate further, police reviewed CCTV footage from the streets of Ardmore and discovered that Christina had visited a bar in Philadelphia before returning to her apartment. At the bar, investigators found footage of Christina meeting a man who later hugged her, the same man she had returned to her apartment with. Christina and a new acquaintance hailed a taxi after leaving the bar. Detectives tracked her movements to rebuild the timeline of events leading up to her death. They eliminated Melton as a suspect since he wasn't with her that day. They still had to determine if her death was connected to the earlier robbery or just a coincidence. On August 25, the police got a new lead. Andrew Sanford, the taxi driver who drove Christina and her companion that night. He reported that Christina and her friend had approached him, and they didn't use the taxi app. After agreeing on a fare, they got into the taxi. According to Sanford, the couple seemed affectionate and friendly, so they didn't raise any suspicions. Sanford also remembered that when they arrived at their destination, Christina took the initiative to settle the fare. However, she didn't have any cash on her. She offered to leave her credit card, but Sanford refused. Then, Christina's friend offered him $100 if he would wait 10 to 15 minutes near the house while they went to the apartment. Sanford left 20 minutes later, as neither Christina nor her friend returned. Christina and the man entered their apartment around 3 a.m. At 4 a.m., Christina made a brief call to her cousin, but didn't speak a word. Her cousin, however, heard a man in the background instructing Christina not to call the police. The call ended abruptly, leaving the cousin unclear about what was happening. The police later determined the timeline of the crime using the apartment's door sensors, which recorded the exact times the doors were opened. The data showed that the first door opening occurred at 3:08 a.m. and the next at 5:10 a.m. Since the apartment was on the second floor, the investigators suspected that the perpetrator had left through the sliding glass door on the balcony, which was also detected by the security system around the same time. This explained why the surveillance cameras did not capture the moment when the man Christina met at the bar left the apartment. When the police arrived after Alex's call, they found Christina alone in the apartment. Based on this information, the police theorized that the perpetrator escaped by jumping off the balcony. The investigation's next step was to seek the public's help through the media. After releasing the surveillance camera images, the authorities asked anyone with information to come forward. The photos showed two individuals, Andre Melton and the second person who was at Christina's apartment on the night of her death. Surprisingly, Andre Melton called the police by himself, admitting to stealing from Christina but denying involvement in her murder. On August 26, the police station received an anonymous call from a man who claimed to know one of the suspects in the recent crime. The caller revealed that he had shared a room with the suspect at a psychiatric clinic in Philadelphia. According to the caller, the suspect had previously assaulted a woman in Love Park and molesting her. The suspect became aggressive, shouting and causing a disturbance, and was eventually hospitalized for 2 hours at a cost of $70. However, he was not identified. The caller provided more chilling information. The suspect had bragged about strangling a woman and felt proud and satisfied by the act. This new information convinced investigators that the suspect was likely responsible for the murder of Christina Carlincraft. The police received another call from a Philadelphia relative of the suspect, who identified the man in the photo as Jonathan Wesley Harris, a convicted felon with a history of robbery. Harris had been released from prison on July 15, just 5 weeks before Christina's murder. After studying the suspect's entire biography, it became clear that Andre Melton and Jonathan Harris had no prior connection and had never met. As a result, the police ruled out any link between their crimes. Additionally, the police gained access to Harris's phone messages. On August 22, he texted a friend that he had met an attractive woman and was going to her apartment. On August 28, the police obtained an arrest warrant for Jonathan Harris. It was essential to apprehend him as soon as possible, as no one knew what he might do next. However, Harris had left no trail. When investigators contacted Harris's sister on August 29, 2018, she revealed that he had recently purchased a bus ticket to Pittsburgh. As it turned out, Harris was already on the bus when the conversation took place. The Ardor police were unable to act, and the officers wouldn't be able to catch up with him. The Pittsburgh police were their last hope. Timing was crucial, and the police investigating Christina's death contacted the Pittsburgh Law Enforcement Agency for assistance. They informed the task force of the bus's expected arrival time in Pittsburgh and shared a photo of Harris, helping them plan a strategic ambush. The officers blocked off all potential escape routes and were prepared to apprehend the suspect at a moment's notice. As the bus approached, one of the employees spotted Harris and allowed him to disembark calmly, reducing the likelihood of panic or chaotic behavior. About 10 minutes later, a police officer intercepted Harris. Harris gave a false name when asked to identify himself. He was arrested and taken to the police station, where detectives from Philadelphia interrogated him about his involvement in Christina's case. Harris claimed that he met Christina at a bar or nightclub, where she was alone, and he approached her. He admitted to being under the influence of both illegal substances and alcohol at the time. After chatting and having a drink, Christina invited him to her place. Once they arrived, Harris asked the taxi driver to wait, intending to return shortly. However, he ended up staying with Christina, and they drank multiple bottles of wine together. He claimed that they then engaged in an intimate relationship with mutual consent and used a prohibited substance. Afterward, Harris demanded that Christina pay him $1,200, which she refused. The situation escalated into a physical altercation when Christina allegedly hit Harris with a wine bottle. In response, Harris claimed he hit her in the face, causing her to fall to the floor. When Christina attempted to call for emergency assistance, Harris strangled her with sweatpants until she lost consciousness. Despite his account, several inconsistencies were found in his story. During the toxicology examination, experts found no prohibited substances in Christina's body, only alcohol. This contradicted the suspect's initial claim that he had only hit her once. When confronted with the results, Harris admitted to lying. Harris initially tried to convince detectives of his innocence, claiming Christina was fine when he left her apartment. However, during a subsequent interrogation, he fully confessed to his guilt. He explained that he had panicked after severely beating her, leaving her while she was still breathing, and covering her with a blanket to avoid the sight. Ultimately, Jonathan Harris confessed to taking Christina's life and attempting to escape detection by jumping off the balcony. Despite his earlier confession, Harris pleaded not guilty at the trial. Nevertheless, the investigators had gathered substantial evidence, making it impossible for Harris and his lawyer to win the case. The court was expected to sentence Jonathan Harris to 22 to 40 years in prison for the crime of third-degree life deprivation. However, the large amount of evidence presented by the prosecutors convinced the court that the crime was intentional, making life imprisonment a possibility. During the trial, a key witness testified against Harris. This witness had shared a room with Harris at a psychiatric clinic and had previously reported Harris to the police. Harris had confessed to the crime while in the clinic, telling the witness that he enjoyed the feeling of squeezing someone and watching them take their last breath. In the end, Judge William R. Carpenter sentenced Jonathan Wesley Harris to 30 years to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The judge handed down an additional 22 to 45-year sentence to Harris. The lengthy sentence was intended to send a message to future authorities who might consider granting him early release or pardon. In a separate case, Andre Melton was arrested in December 2018 and charged with burglarizing Carlencraft's apartment. He was sentenced in March 2020 to 1 to 4 years in prison, followed by 3 years of consecutive probation, totaling 7 years under court supervision. Before receiving his sentence, Melton apologized to Carlencraft's family. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Kristen Trickle. Kristen Trickle was born on August 14, 1993, in a small town in southeastern Nebraska. However, her early childhood was marked by turmoil. Her biological mother abandoned the family when Kristen was just 3 years old. Despite the challenges, Kristen's father, James, raised her on his own, providing for her every need. Unfortunately, James struggled with a severe and worsening illness. Tragically, he passed away when Kristen was 16 years old. As a result, Kristen was at risk of being sent to a shelter until she turned 18, as there were no other close relatives to care for her. Fortunately, Kristen's aunt and uncle, who lived in Kansas, stepped in to provide a loving home. Although they already had 3 children of their own, they were willing to take in their orphaned niece and give her a comfortable and happy life. Kristen met Colby, a talented young musician, at church. At 18, Colby was already skilled on the guitar and wrote his own songs. He was passionate about building a successful music career. As they spent more time together, Kristen and Colby's friendship blossomed into a romance. Colby's charming personality and musical talents captivated Kristen, and he often wrote songs for her. He was outgoing, friendly, and had a way of making people feel at ease. After graduating from high school, Colby's interests shifted towards the military. He enlisted in the U.S. Armed Forces at 18 and went on to serve for 3 years, establishing a solid military career during that time. Colby maintained a close relationship with Kristen, frequently calling and corresponding with her. At 21, he made a surprise decision to join the reserves, returned home, and proposed to Kristen, who happily accepted. They got married in April 2014. After their wedding, Colby and Kristen settled in Hays, Kansas, where Colby completed his college education and pursued a music career, albeit with limited success. He performed at local events and parties, playing cover versions of popular songs. They had 2 dogs, which they loved dearly, and many people considered their marriage to be happy. However, tragedy struck 5 years into their marriage. On Halloween Eve, October 31, 2019, at around 4 a.m., a distress call was made to emergency services. The caller, who identified himself as Colby Kristen, reported that his wife, Kristen, had shot herself in the head with a revolver that was kept in their home. When medical help and the police arrived at the scene, a young man opened the front door for the officers, but stayed outside himself. Inside, the team found Kristen, who appeared to be surprisingly calm despite the severity of the situation. When the officers entered the bedroom, they found a woman, Kristen, lying on the bed in a pool of her own blood. A large revolver was on her abdomen, and she had a visible gunshot wound on her chin. At first, it seemed like she had already died, but surprisingly, she moved her hand, and an officer detected a weak pulse and breathing. The officers moved Kristen to the adjacent room to position her on the floor for resuscitation attempts. Despite their efforts, Kristen had died by the time the ambulance arrived, and the medical team confirmed her death. Sergeant Brandon Hotman went outside to inform Colby, Kristen's husband, that she had passed away. Colby repeatedly asked if Hotman was sure, and when he was told the truth, he broke down in tears. However, his behavior and tears seemed insincere, given that just minutes earlier, he had been chatting casually with other patrolmen about video games. At first glance, the scene suggested that she had taken her own life, but experienced detectives quickly suspected that something was amiss. It was the eve of Halloween, and she had been preparing for the celebration, which made her apparent decision to end her life all the more puzzling. The detectives found handmade costume decorations on her vanity and themed treats in the kitchen, including lollipop bats and ghosts, gummy worms, and other sweets. This suggested that she had been looking forward to the holiday, which made her death even more unexpected. She was found nearly undressed, wearing only her underwear, which was unusual. Typically, women take care to present themselves in a way that they would want to be seen, even in death. Furthermore, the method of death, a gunshot to the head, was also uncharacteristic of a woman. This method is often avoided by women due to concerns about disfiguring themselves. Kristen's body was severely damaged. One of the most puzzling aspects of her death was the gun itself. The large revolver would have been difficult for Kristen to handle due to her small size and fragile nature. It would have been hard for her to hold the gun, let alone twist her arm to shoot herself in the chin. The position of the gun also raised questions for the officer, as it was lying on her stomach, pointing sideways. Kristen's husband later explained that after finding her, he too had considered taking his own life. He held the revolver to his temple but then changed his mind and called emergency services, hoping to save his wife. At the scene of the crime, detectives were surprised when the victim's phone, which was sitting on a nightstand, rang with an alarm. It turned out that she had set the alarm to remind herself of plans for the morning, but it seemed that she had changed her mind and taken her own life during the night. This unusual detail raised suspicions, and detectives thought that someone might have staged the scene to look like a suicide. As a result, the victim's husband, Colby, became the main suspect and was asked to come to the police station for questioning. He agreed to go willingly. When Colby arrived at the police station, he seemed upset but not overly distraught. He remained calm and confident as he explained what had happened the previous evening. According to Colby, his wife Kristen, a manager at Walmart who was expecting a promotion, had come home from work and they had played video games together. Then, he went to bed early because he wasn't feeling well. Kristen had gone to the kitchen to finish preparing holiday treats, leaving Colby to sleep. But in the middle of the night, a loud bang jolted Colby awake. The sudden noise left him dazed and disoriented, his ears ringing, and he couldn't see anything in the darkness. When he finally turned on the light, he was shocked to find his wife Kristen lying motionless beside him, her head bleeding severely. Strangely enough, if it's true as stated by Colby, he attempted to revive his wife, but soon realized it was hopeless. He then picked up a revolver, put it to his own head, but ultimately set it back down on her body. He called emergency services and went outside to wait for the police. This sequence of events raises several questions. For example, why did he place the gun on her abdomen instead of disposing of it elsewhere? It's also unclear why he waited outside for the police and medics if he thought his wife might still be alive. In situations like this, people usually try to save the person's life or apply pressure to the wound to stop the bleeding. However, Colby did not attempt to help his wife again, claiming he was in shock. While a police officer was trying to provide first aid before the medics arrived, he did not show any interest in his wife's condition. Instead, he stood outside and casually chatted with a police officer about music and video games. When Colby learned of Kristen's death, he briefly teared up, but quickly composed himself. At the police station, he answered routine questions, including whether Kristen had life insurance, which he denied. However, he mentioned that he was eligible for minor payouts from his time in the armed forces. During the conversation, Colby began boasting about his military accomplishments, claiming to have worked in intelligence and participated in special operations worldwide. Despite sounding credible, Colby's claims were largely false. When asked why he thought Kristen might have taken her own life, he attributed it to her long history of depression, which stemmed from a traumatic childhood and adolescence. He cited her mother's betrayal, her father's death, and her forced relocation to live with an uncle and aunt she had never met before as contributing factors. Colby's words seemed convincing, but experienced investigators sensed he was lying and had possibly rehearsed his story. Despite their suspicions, they had no concrete evidence to charge him with a crime, so they had to release him. Kristen's family was shocked and devastated by her death. Her uncle, aunt, and siblings immediately traveled 500 miles to speak with the police and make funeral arrangements. They strongly believed that Kristen would never have taken her own life, citing her strong religious faith and regular church attendance. According to her family, Kristen was a happy and optimistic person who loved life and had big plans for the future. She had even been working on opening a shelter for homeless animals and had found a property she wanted to lease. Investigations confirmed that Kristen had been planning to rent a new property and was expecting a promotion at work, which she was proud of. She was also preparing for Halloween and had promised to visit her sister for her birthday in November. Her relatives stated that she had no history of depression or mental health issues and did not have any harmful habits. Her family also emphasized that Kristen would never abandon her dogs, which she loved dearly. They suspected that her husband, Colby, might have been involved in her disappearance. They described Colby as a controlling and cruel man who dictated whom Kristen could interact with and would become enraged if she didn't respond to his calls or messages immediately. He prohibited her from contacting her relatives, but she would secretly call them from her husband's home. Visits with her family were infrequent. During her last visit, she confided in them that she could no longer endure the mistreatment and had discussed it with her husband. She warned that if things didn't improve, they would have to separate. The autopsy of Kristen revealed a single bullet wound on her chin, which suggested that the shot was fired while she was on her back with the gun pressed to her head. While it was possible that she could have shot herself, it would have been very difficult to do so. There were no signs of struggle or resistance on her body. The detectives, however, were not convinced. Given Colby's history of controlling behavior, they suspected that he might have been violent towards Kristen in the past. They conducted a thorough examination of Kristen's body, looking for any signs of bruises, abrasions, or scratches that might indicate a history of abuse. Despite their efforts, no internal or external injuries were found, aside from the gunshot wound. The investigation then shifted its focus to Colby's personality, revealing that he was a habitual liar who frequently deceived others and even himself with convincing falsehoods. Colby's story didn't add up. Despite his claims of being in danger and having connections to intelligence, he had no history of being in high-risk situations or working with intelligence agencies. In fact, he had been dishonest with those around him about his music career and income. In reality, his wife Kristen was the primary breadwinner, working hard to support their family. Colby, on the other hand, only played occasional gigs during holidays and spent most of his time playing video games. He had talent, but lacked the persistence and patience to succeed, and his laziness held him back. The police investigation uncovered some information. A search of Colby and Kristen gadgets revealed a revealing look at their lives. Kristen's phone calendar was filled with appointments, from haircuts to meetings with a real estate agent. Meanwhile, Colby's messages showed that he had been flirting with another woman, even while at the police station. He had exchanged messages on a laptop in the living room, raising suspicions about his honesty. A recovered search history also revealed that Colby had been researching life insurance payouts in the event of death shortly before the tragedy. This discovery raised more questions about Colby's motives and potential involvement in the events that unfolded. An investigation revealed that Colby had lied about his financial situation. He had taken out 2 insurance policies on his wife, naming himself as the beneficiary in the event of her death. These policies included military spouse insurance and a standard life insurance policy, with payouts that were much higher than Colby had initially claimed. In fact, he had calculated exactly how much he would receive if his wife died. Despite the suspicious circumstances and Colby's inconsistent statements, the case ultimately hinged on the forensic expert's report. The report concluded that there were no signs of violence on the body, except for a single gunshot wound, suggesting that Kristen may have taken her own life. The case was eventually closed, and Colby received the insurance payouts, nearly $50,000 from the military spouse insurance and over $100,000 from the life insurance policy. On the same day the money was deposited into his account, Colby ordered a life-sized realistic doll from an online store, apparently for intimate purposes. Colby indulged in a lavish lifestyle, buying a new gaming console, an electric guitar, and expensive musical equipment. He spent the rest of the money on fancy clothes and frequent nights out at bars and restaurants, feeling carefree and convinced that he had gotten away with the crime since there was no evidence against him. For nearly 2 years, Colby lived a life of luxury, but in the summer of 2021, a new district prosecutor took office and reopened the investigation into Colby's wife's disappearance. Detectives had approached the prosecutor, convinced that Colby had murdered his wife. They presented evidence, including the restored browser history, Colby's unusual behavior, and his clear motive. After reviewing the case, the prosecutor authorized the reopening of the investigation. In July 2021, Colby was arrested and charged with first-degree premeditated homicide and intentionally misleading the investigation. During his arrest, he remained calm and immediately contacted his lawyers, who began working on his defense. Colby's defense team argued that his wife had suffered from chronic depression for many years and that her disappearance was inevitable. They also portrayed Colby as a loving and caring husband, a valorous serviceman, and a devout person, contradicting the detective's suspicions. The prosecution took a unique approach by hiring experienced specialists to create a psychological profile of the deceased and examine her emotional state leading up to the tragedy. This method, known as a psychological autopsy, involved analyzing data from Kristen's phone, social media posts, recent photos, and interviews with her relatives, friends, and colleagues. After months of gathering and analyzing information, the experts reached a clear conclusion: Kristen had no intention of ending her life, given her short-term and long-term plans. The trial and verdict in this complex case were delayed, starting in September 2023, nearly 4 years after the tragedy. Although the defendant had a clear motive, acted suspiciously, and lied during interrogations, the forensic expert's initial conclusion initially worked in his favor. The prosecution had obtained a new report that could potentially change the course of the case. When questioned about the insurance inquiries on his computer, Colby claimed that his wife had likely made them to find out the payout amount. However, the timing of the requests contradicted his statement, as his wife was at work at the time, confirmed by surveillance footage. Colby was also asked about a life-size doll he had purchased shortly after his wife's death, as well as other expensive items. He explained that he couldn't sleep alone and needed something to hold on to, and that he bought the console and guitar to take his mind off his grief. His mother backed up his claims, vigorously defending her son throughout the trial. The psychiatrist's crucial evaluation revealed that Kristen had not intentionally ended her own life. This detailed assessment was instrumental in determining the events surrounding her death. The autopsy report revealed an unusual aspect: the angle at which the bullet entered Kristen's chin was peculiar. The forensic analysis indicated that the bullet was fired from the left side of Kristen, contradicting her dominant right-handedness. This raises questions about whether someone standing on Kristen's left side pulled the trigger or if she shot herself with her left hand. The latter is less plausible considering Kristen was a right-handed individual. This vital evidence raises serious concerns about Colby's potential involvement in Kristen's death. After deliberating the case, the jury unanimously delivered a guilty verdict, finding Colby guilty of all charges. Consequently, Colby received a life imprisonment sentence, eligible for parole after a minimum of 50 years. Notably, Colby refused to accept his guilt, despite being given ample opportunity. Throughout his appeals process, all of his attempts to refute his sentence were ultimately unsuccessful. In the end, no modifications were ever made to Kristen's official cause of death report. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Nicholas Wilcox. Nicholas Wilcox, a 39-year-old man from Putnam, Connecticut, lives in a duplex apartment, a popular property type in Florida that is designed for two families, with separate rooms, yards, and entrances. Isabella, a 38-year-old woman from Brazil, was the first person invited to rent one of the vacant apartments by Nicholas Wilcox. She used to work as a flight attendant for a national airline in Brazil. After getting divorced in 2010, she moved to America with her children and later married an American, which helped her obtain a green card. Isabella's marriage ended in 2016, and she started dating Eric Robinson, a 46-year-old man from Massachusetts who had never been married and had no children. Despite their romantic feelings for each other, their relationship was occasionally turbulent due to their passionate nature and Eric's bachelor lifestyle. According to Isabella, Eric's behavior was inconsistent and unpredictable, switching between cheerfulness and aggression without warning. This led to repeated breakups and makeups. By June 2017, they had separated once again, shortly before Eric and Isabella moved in with Nicholas. Initially, the living arrangement worked well, with Nicholas and Isabella and Eric respecting each other's space while also spending quality time together. However, over time, problems arose. It was discovered that Eric was using and storing illicit substances, which explained his erratic mood swings. This behavior led to Eric's arrest on August 23, 2017. Nicholas was fortunate to have a steady stream of work, unlike Isabella, who struggled to find a suitable job. To make ends meet, she started helping her neighbor in the construction business. It's worth noting that Nicholas's family had a long history of working in similar trades. His grandfather was a fisherman and boat builder, while his father dedicated his life to construction. After graduating in 1996, Nicholas joined the family business, becoming a roofer. He worked alongside his older brother, Donald, as contractors, building their own client base. At 23, Nicholas started a family with his high school classmate, Kathy. They had a daughter a year later, and twins 3 years after that. Throughout this time, Nicholas worked hard to provide for his family. Despite his busy schedule, friends and acquaintances remembered him as a devoted husband and father. However, His dedication to his professional pursuits may have contributed to the eventual breakdown of his family. They divorced shortly after the birth of their younger children. Despite this, Nicholas continued to support and communicate with his family. In 2017, Nicholas made a fresh start by moving to Florida to pursue better job opportunities. The new location proved to be a smart choice, as he saw a significant increase in clients. Unlike his previous seasonal work, Nicholas was now able to earn a steady income almost year-round. As a professional, Nicholas's skills were in high demand in Florida, where powerful hurricanes frequently damaged homes along the coast during storm season. His expertise was needed to reinforce and repair homes, which helped him build a successful business. Despite leaving his family back in Connecticut, Nicholas remained committed to caring for his children from a distance, sending them financial support and visiting whenever possible, as per his agreement with his ex-wife. After living in a multi-apartment complex in Fort Lauderdale, Nicholas moved to the suburbs to lower his housing costs. This is when he met Isabella. As the hurricane season began, Nicholas's workload increased significantly due to daily orders. At the same time, Hurricane Irma was approaching the area where Nicholas lived and worked. An emergency was declared, and about 7 million people were evacuated from coastal areas. To prepare for the storm, Nicholas spent his time reinforcing homes, boarding up windows and doors, and later clearing the debris left behind. Nicholas's main job was to help people, and he got paid for it. But he wasn't in it just for the money. His older brother said that Nicholas always lent a hand to those in need. In September 2017, Florida was bracing for a devastating hurricane. Nicholas spent the day boarding up windows with plywood to prepare. As a result, there was a shortage of plywood in stores, leading to long lines of people waiting to buy some. At that time, Nicholas met a woman named Pamela, who was struggling to find materials to protect her home. Nicholas promised to help her, and that evening, he delivered the 7 sheets of plywood she needed. He then spent the whole day boarding up her doors and windows, refusing payment for his efforts. Nicholas was deeply sympathetic to Pamela's plight as a single mother in need of assistance. In response, he offered her help, and she was extremely grateful. This sparked a romantic connection between them. The devastating hurricane that followed brought Nicholas a substantial amount of work, which allowed him to employ his neighbor, Isabella, as his assistant. Isabella's responsibilities included cleaning up job sites and handing Nicholas tools as needed. As they spent more time together, their friendly interactions blossomed into romance. On September 3rd, they made a commitment to each other, sealing their promise with a handwritten vow in blood, symbolizing their desire for a long, happy life together, filled with many children. The lovers, Nicholas and Isabella, faced minor issues and disagreements soon after their union. These disputes escalated, culminating in a serious conflict on September 22nd, which led Isabella to leave home and spend the night in a hotel. However, they reconciled the next morning. According to Isabella, Nicholas was neglecting her and showing a lack of respect. Nicholas, on the other hand, believed she was exaggerating. Their disagreements ultimately led to severe consequences. On October 5, 2017, a mysterious call was made to the local police. The caller claimed to be Isabella's former husband and asked the police to contact Isabella, stating she had information about a recent crime. However, he didn't provide further details. The police responded promptly and called Isabella, who sounded hysterical. When questioned about the situation, she claimed everything was fine, except for a fight with her boyfriend, Nicholas. Isabella told the police that her partner had left her and driven away, but when they mentioned a call from her former husband, she broke down and confessed that her partner was actually dead. She claimed to know where the body was and offered to show them. When the police arrived at the address Isabella provided, they found a house that was being prepared for a hurricane, with all windows and doors boarded up. Inside, they noticed a strong smell of cleaning products and paint, indicating that one of the bedrooms had been thoroughly cleaned. However, upon closer inspection, the detective suspected that someone was trying to cover something up. The walls and floor had been hastily and sloppily painted, and they found containers of hydrogen peroxide, which is often used to clean bloodstains. They discovered small bloodstains on the bedding and bedside table, and it was clear that the old mattress had been replaced. The police found blood stains throughout the room, suggesting a violent crime had taken place. Isabella had attempted to clean up the scene but hadn't finished before the police arrived. Isabella was discovered inside the duplex, visibly distressed, and explained that she had been under the influence of a sedative during the phone call with her ex-husband, which accounted for her unusual behavior. Despite her initial confusion, Isabella confirmed that she knew what had happened in the room and where the body was located. Due to her unstable state, the police decided to take her to the station for further questioning. Meanwhile, the police had spoken with her ex-husband again, who provided a partial account of the events. According to Isabella's ex-husband, she had called him and told him about the crime. However, during her interrogation, Isabella claimed that her former boyfriend, Eric Robinson, was involved in the crime. She stated that on October 5th, around 2 a.m., Eric had arrived at the duplex, found her and Nicholas asleep, and became enraged by a vow hanging above the bed's headboard in the bedroom. Eric woke Isabella by holding a knife to her throat, threatening to harm her if she screamed. As he did, she saw Nicholas, who was lying next to her, struggling to breathe. But Eric didn't allow her to look any further and forced her out of the bedroom. Then, he brutally beat Nicholas, who was defenseless, using a brass knuckle and a bat. After the beating, Eric wrapped Nicholas' body in a tarp and tied it up with straps. He threatened Isabella, forcing her to help him get rid of the body. Later, the detectives were confused as to why Isabella, instead of calling the police, had called her ex-husband. In an explanation, Isabella said she was terrified and sought comfort and guidance. According to her, Eric also made her clean up the crime scene and erase all evidence. Before leaving, he returned her phone, which he had taken earlier. Her confession raised doubts and required further investigation. Additionally, the detectives noticed visible bruises and scratches on Isabella's body, which she claimed were a result of Eric beating her after Nicholas' death. The investigation started with a search for the victim and the suspect, who revealed the location of Nicholas. While medical examiners worked on the body, forensic specialists arrived at the scene. Meanwhile, law enforcement searched for Eric, who had been released from prison on October 3rd and was living at a different address. During this time, Eric had met a woman, Merida, and was staying with her. Merida told the police that on the night of October 5th, her boyfriend received a phone call and left immediately. He returned around 5 a.m., packed his things, and left again without explanation. When asked if she noticed any bloodstains on her boyfriend's clothes, Merida said she hadn't seen anything suspicious. Eric was found around 8 p.m., 4 miles away from the house. He refused to cooperate with the investigation and was taken into custody for further inquiry. During the interrogation, Eric provided a different account of the events than Isabella's. According to Eric, Isabella had contacted him on the night of October 5th, despite having a restraining order against him. Isabella attacked Nicholas while under the influence of banned substances and ultimately ended his life. After regaining her composure, she realized she needed help and asked Eric to assist her. In exchange, she promised to rekindle their relationship and start anew. Eric, still having strong feelings for her, agreed to her terms. The investigation revealed that Isabella was not as innocent as she seemed. She had a history of police encounters, and on September 22nd, a heated argument with Nicholas got out of hand. Under the influence of Xanax and other substances, Isabella became violent, destroying some of Nicholas' belongings and damaging his work vehicle. Fearing for his life, Nicholas contacted the police. Although they reconciled the next morning and Nicholas dropped the complaint, investigators discovered Isabella's history of erratic behavior, including a conversation with her ex-husband that shed more light on her past. He described Isabella as having a volatile personality and a hot temper. During their argument, he had threatened to report her to immigration services if she continued to behave in such a manner. For Isabella, the opportunity to live in the U.S. was crucial, so the threat of deportation was devastating. It's possible that during another argument, Isabella's explosive personality led her to react violently, motivated by her desire to stay in America. To gather more information, detectives started interviewing people close to them. A neighbor who lived in the adjacent duplex proved to be a crucial witness. She reported seeing Eric arrive at the scene in his car on the night of the crime. He then retrieved some tools and trash bags before leaving the area. The investigation continued, with substantial evidence collected. On October 11th, Isabella was called in for another interrogation, which she attended voluntarily since she had not been arrested at that point. Detectives reviewed video surveillance footage and determined that on the night of the incident, Isabella personally moved Nicholas's body and disposed of it in a trash container. During this time, she remained calm and composed, making decisions independently. She also met with Eric Robinson that night. Isabella appeared relaxed and friendly. She even purchased items needed for emergency repairs herself. However, as the investigation progressed, she began to change her story, adding new details about the events. Isabella claimed that Eric had threatened to kill her and deport her and her children, forcing her to act as she did. Although her statement seemed believable, investigators were cautious in their conclusions. Both Eric and Isabella had questionable pasts, which raised suspicions. Eric, in particular, had a history of run-ins with the law, dating back to 2001, primarily for possession and distribution of narcotics. In August 2016, Isabella had legitimate reasons to fear Eric in question, as he had committed an aggravated assault against a woman. In June 2017, he was arrested for strangulation and later that year for possessing prohibited substances. Eric's neighbors were terrified of him due to his aggressive and unpredictable behavior, and they actively avoided him. On October 14th, experts discovered traces of Isabella's DNA on the Nicholas body, contradicting her claim of not having touched Nicholas. This evidence suggested that she was involved in the violent crime against her lover, at the very least in disposing of the body and eliminating evidence. Despite the evidence, neither Isabella or Eric admitted to any wrongdoing. While Eric was held in custody, Isabella was briefly detained before being released to await trial. Although everyone expected the court proceedings to begin soon, various complications and delays pushed the trial back by 5 years. The trial of Eric Robinson was significantly delayed due to the bureaucratic issues. During this time, the prosecution developed its strategy and tactics, while the defense thoroughly reviewed the investigation findings. Additionally, new evidence was discovered, including the recovery of Eric's deleted social media account, which he had used to discuss the crime with his former friend. As the trial approached, Isabella made a plea deal with the prosecution. She agreed to testify against Eric Robinson. On April 10, 2023, the trial finally took place. The prosecution argued that Eric was solely responsible for the crime against Nicholas, while Isabella's role was presented as a witness who tampered with evidence and helped eliminate traces, a crime in itself. The trial was marked by several cancellations due to legal complexities, but resumed after a week. Throughout the trial, Eric was charged with premeditated murder. Despite inconsistencies in Isabella's testimonies, her attorney maintained her innocence. The prosecution emphasized witness statements describing Eric's unusual behavior on the night of the crime. Specifically, Eric used his new girlfriend's car, which didn't have GPS tracking, to avoid detection. He also left his mobile phone at home to prevent tracking. Separately, other case details came to light. After the crime, Eric and Isabella were together in a room nearby, where they were intimate. Isabella later explained her actions, stating she was under the influence of strong sedatives at the time and also feared for her life after what had happened. The motive behind the brutal and senseless murder of Nicholas was revealed to be jealousy. Although Isabella had ended their relationship, Eric still considered her his girlfriend. When he was released from prison, he returned home to find that significant changes had taken place in his absence, which only fueled his rage and hatred. During this time, Eric plotted his revenge against his perceived rival. He committed a cold-blooded attack while Nicholas was asleep and vulnerable, sealing his fate with the first strike. Eric then attempted to cover his tracks by scattering evidence in various locations. The murder weapon was later found in a landfill, and Nicholas's body was discovered wrapped in tarpaulin and hidden in a trash container. Isabella, following Eric's instructions, painted over the blood-splattered walls and cleaned the area to conceal the evidence. Ultimately, 51-year-old Eric was sentenced to life imprisonment without parole for second-degree murder. Isabella was found guilty of aiding Eric, but the court considered threats and coercion as mitigating circumstances. As a result, she received a suspended sentence and is on probation until 2026. Isabella was willing to do whatever it took to gain U.S. citizenship. Just 10 days after Eric was incarcerated, the parties signed another agreement in which Eric promised to marry Isabella. However, he failed to follow through on this promise. It seems that Isabella is willing to marry anyone as long as it helps her maintain her status. All the men she has been involved with have been used for her own selfish purposes, and she has manipulated them into considering marriage. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Marisela Botella Valadez. Marisela Botella Valadez was born in 1997 in Seattle, Washington. As the eldest of two children in a Latin American family, she was known for being a kind, outgoing young woman with many friends. She excelled in school and went on to attend a prestigious university after graduating. Marisela was a stunning young woman with a petite frame, long brunette hair, and big brown eyes. She was always the center of attention and loved being around people, often attending lively parties and making the most of every day. On October 3, 2020, Marisela traveled to Dallas to visit old friends, but she planned to return by Monday morning. Her brother was supposed to pick her up from the airport on October 5, and they would head to the university together. However, when the plane arrived, Marisela was nowhere to be found. A search for the missing student began when her brother realized she wasn't among the passengers who had disembarked from the flight. He tried to call her, but her phone was turned off. He then contacted their parents to inform them of the situation. Marisela's disappearance was unusual, as she was a responsible and serious young woman who would not normally miss university classes without warning. Marisela's family reached out to her friends in Dallas to gather information about her possible whereabouts and her last known location. Their efforts led them to a popular club in the city, where she was spotted partying with friends the night before her disappearance. While there, she had met a man named Chuck and they had danced and socialized together over drinks. After that, they of them left the club, and Marisela was not seen again. When her family was unable to reach her by phone, they grew extremely concerned and frightened, prompting them to quickly report her disappearance to the police. She had purchased tickets for a flight to Seattle, but she never boarded the plane. Her whereabouts since that night were unknown. To investigate further, it was crucial to identify the new person she had met, their destination, and whether she had left with them voluntarily. Reviewing surveillance footage from outside the club, authorities observed Maricela exiting with a young man, but his face was not clearly visible on the video. According to the footage, Maricela appeared to be walking with a man voluntarily before getting into a black Audi car and driving off in an unknown direction. Several days had passed since her disappearance, and she had not contacted anyone, logged into her social media accounts, or made any transactions on her bank cards. The police urgently needed to identify the stranger she was with to determine where to search for them. One of her friends reported that the companion might be named Chuck, but this information was not enough. However, street camera footage helped investigators determine the direction the car had traveled. Further review of supermarket security footage revealed that they had stopped to shop, appearing happy and affectionate towards each other. The footage showed Maricela selecting drinks and candies, while he paid for the items using a card in the name of Charles Beltran. It became clear that Maricela had left with Beltran, a 31-year-old musician who was gaining popularity as a local rap star. However, Beltran had a troubled past, having been to prison twice for robbery and armed assault. He had been released on parole after serving less than 3 years and was on the verge of releasing his own music album. An investigation revealed that Maricela's phone had been active at a specific location on the night she went missing. The location was linked to a house owned by a woman named Lisa Dyke, who was renting a room to Beltran. When police and an FBI agent investigating Maricela's disappearance visited the house, they found it empty. The police were only able to reach Lisa Dyke by phone, as she said she was out of state for work. She confirmed that Charles Beltran had been renting a room in her home, but claimed he had moved out about 2 weeks ago. She also stated that she had no idea where he was after that. They searched the house where he used to live and made several alarming discoveries. The interior was a disaster zone with mess and unsanitary conditions everywhere. It appeared as if the residents had departed abruptly, only taking essential belongings and abandoning the rest. Dirty dishes were stacked high in the sink, old food and mold sat on the kitchen table, and garbage covered the corners of the floor. In stark contrast, investigators found multiple empty bottles of cleaning supplies scattered around, and there were also remnants on the floor and carpet indicating an attempt to scrub areas clean. A disturbing black statue of death, draped in a black cloak and grasping a scythe, occupied one of the upstairs rooms. While it could have been dismissed as an eccentric decoration, its presentation as a makeshift altar, complete with wax candles, dried flowers, and 2 metal bowls, suggested a more sinister purpose. The setup bore an uncanny resemblance to the Mexican cult of Santa Muerte, which reveres a female embodiment of death. The house exuded an atmosphere of foreboding, as if a traumatic event had occurred, prompting the occupants to hastily gather their belongings and flee in a state of panic. A more thorough investigation was conducted using specialized tools to detect blood traces. This revealed multiple wiped blood stains in one of the bedrooms, the bathroom, and the hallway. The bedroom with the most significant bloodstains belonged to Charles, suggesting a violent crime had occurred there. However, the identity of the victim remained unclear. Despite attempts to clean the area, the blood had penetrated the carpet, seeped under the baseboards, and stained the wallpaper and furniture. To confirm the source of the blood, experts compared the samples with Mariela's DNA. The results eliminated any remaining doubts, confirming that the blood belonged to Mariela. The police had to seal the house as a crime scene, but their next challenge was to track down the main suspect, potential accomplices, and witnesses. However, this proved to be a difficult task as Charles had already fled the scene, and the owner had quickly put the house up for sale even before the police arrived. To gather more information, the police decided to investigate the people who had recently lived in the house. According to the neighbors, who described a complicated love triangle, 3 individuals had lived in the house: 57-year-old Lisa Dyke, 48-year-old Nina Morano, and 31-year-old Charles Beltran. However, The nature of their relationships and the reason for their sudden disappearance remained unclear. To move forward with the investigation, the police needed to look into each person's background and find them as soon as possible for questioning. The owner of the house, who was the only one reachable by phone, was a well-known lawyer with a commanding and ambitious personality. She had been married 3 times and had inherited a substantial amount of money after becoming a widow several years ago. Given her financial situation, it was unclear why she had rented a room to Charles, as she was not known for her charitable nature, suggesting that she may have had an ulterior motive. Charles Beltran, also known as Chuck, had big dreams of becoming a successful rapper. However, his lack of funds and connections, combined with a troubled past, made it difficult for him to get started. That was until he met Dyke, who offered him a helping hand. She took him in, setting up a small recording studio in her home, and even funded the production of several music videos to help launch his career. Dyke also provided Chuck with a car, paid for his social expenses, and bought him stylish clothing. Despite her significant financial investment in Chuck, Dyke maintained that their relationship was purely professional, insisting that she saw great potential in the young rapper and was simply investing in his future. The situation with Nina Morano was particularly interesting. She had been in a long-term relationship with Lisa, and after Lisa's husband passed away, they women no longer hid their romance. In fact, they had gotten married just a few months prior. Nina moved in with Lisa, who was already living with a young musician named Charles. Although Lisa denied it, a close friend claimed that she had a romantic relationship with Charles, and Lisa had even confided in her friend about how great he was as a lover. It seemed that Lisa was deeply in love with Charles, as evidenced by her efforts to look younger, including losing 55 pounds, changing her image, wearing bright makeup, and getting tattoos. Lisa had also made some significant changes to her life, including evicting her adult children from the home, citing that they were interfering with her personal life. Charles, on the other hand, had a clear interest in staying with Lisa, who was wealthy and could help him financially and advance his music career. However, as a physically attractive man, Charles often engaged in casual flings with young women, which made Lisa extremely jealous. But what was Nina Morano's role in all of this, and specifically, what did she have to do with Morella's disappearance? According to a close friend, Lisa's spouse, Na, was also involved in the unusual love triangle with Lisa and he. Na was a successful lawyer and a wealthy woman. The 3 of them lived a life of luxury together. After they got married, both women took his last name, Beltran, and the 3 of them lived together in the house. But what happened to the people who lived in the house where Morella's blood was discovered? After Morella disappeared, no one was seen at home again. Lisa was contacted once and answered a few questions, claiming she was in another state, but her phone was unreachable after that. There was no information about Na's whereabouts or the main suspect, Charles. On the night of October 5th, investigators monitored the mobile phone signals of the 3 residents and the missing person, Maricela, and found that all 4 signals were coming from within the house. By early morning, the signals had moved to a remote wooded area in suburban Dallas. Shortly after, the signals vanished. A few days later, Lisa briefly responded to messages on her secondary work phone, but it soon became unreachable as well. Using geolocation data from the mobile devices, authorities reconstructed the group's route that night, identifying the stops they made along the way. This information led them to suspect that the missing student's body might have been disposed of in this area. Although this narrowed down the search radius, the area was vast and challenging to navigate, hindering the progress of the investigation. The search for the missing Seattle student was suspended near the new year, as no body or clues were found. However, in March 2021, a local hunter discovered a human skull in the woods that appeared to be relatively recent. The hunter immediately reported the find to the police, who then sent the remains to a forensic laboratory for examination. Dental records confirmed that the remains belonged to the missing student, who had been gone for nearly 6 months. Although the body was badly decomposed and damaged by wild animals, making it impossible to determine the exact cause of death, forensic analysis revealed characteristic marks on the bones that suggested knife wounds. However, it was unclear whether these wounds were fatal. After the authorities found the body in the forest, they quickly identified the first suspects and tracked down Lisa, who had moved to Florida with her partner, Na. They had rented a house in Miami near the ocean. However, when the police arrived, only Na was apprehended, while Lisa went into hiding after learning about the situation. Charles, another suspect, was nowhere to be found, although he occasionally contacted his former girlfriends through messaging apps. In one of his last messages, Charles warned his acquaintances that the police were closing in and that they should be extremely careful. Meanwhile, Na, who was now in custody, denied any involvement in Marcela's disappearance, claiming she knew nothing about what had happened to her. Lisa, on the other hand, used her connections to try to hire a good lawyer for Na. While in Florida, Na attempted to sell her house in South Carolina as quickly as possible, likely to raise funds for their continued hiding or to flee the country. Authorities eventually tracked down Lisa and arrested her, and both women were taken back to Dallas. During initial questioning, neither woman provided any information, and their bail was set at $500,000 each. They were able to post bail and were released to house arrest, but were required to wear tracking devices that allowed authorities to monitor their movements. In August of the same year, Charles made a daring escape attempt, but police were hot on his trail and tracked him down to Utah, where he was hiding at the home of a former girlfriend. She, who had a 5-year-old son with Charles, was overjoyed to see him and didn't ask questions about his sudden return. When Charles was arrested, he initially refused to cooperate with the police or answer their questions. He was counting on his wealthy lover to use her influence and wealth to hire a top-notch lawyer to get him out of trouble. However, things took a dramatic turn on Christmas Eve in 2021. Lisa and Nina, who had been released on bail, suddenly went dark when their tracking bracelet stopped working due to the holiday chaos and high activity. The police didn't send a team to the suspect's location until the next day, but by then, they had already vanished. It was later discovered that the suspects had been carefully planning their escape for months. As a result, by the time the police pursued them, they had already crossed the border into Mexico undetected. From Mexico, they traveled to South Korea by air, and their trail eventually went cold in Cambodia. The FBI teamed up with the Cambodian police and immigration authorities to locate the suspects on the run. They women first raised suspicions after making a large cash withdrawal from an ATM, prompting authorities to monitor their movements. They tried to pay for everything in cash to stay under the radar, but security footage helped reveal their whereabouts. An ATM camera identified the fugitives, and another camera caught the license plate of the vehicle they arrived in. The vehicle's owner cooperated with police and took them to the residence where the foreign women were living extravagantly. They were recaptured in February 2022 and sent back to the United States, where they were taken into custody without the possibility of bail, ensuring they went directly to jail to face the law. Charles realized that his lover was only looking out for herself and had no intention of helping him avoid prison. This led him to decide to cooperate with the investigation and share information. His detailed account of the events that took place that night shocked many. Bellin admitted to being in a romantic relationship with Lisa, the homeowner, and her spouse, Na, but claimed it was motivated by financial gain and a desire to further his music career. He did not have genuine feelings for these women and instead often pursued younger, attractive women, openly engaging in numerous affairs. On October 5, 2020, Chuck met Maricela, a young student, at a nightclub. They spent the evening drinking and dancing together, and he eventually invited her back to his place. Maricela agreed, and when they arrived, Chuck's roommates, Na and Lisa, were already asleep. Chuck and Maricela went to his room, where they engaged in intimate activities and fell asleep. Later that night, Lisa woke up and entered Chuck's room, where she saw Maricela sleeping next to him. This triggered a jealous outburst, and Lisa went to the kitchen to grab a large knife. She then returned to Chuck's room and attacked Maricela, repeatedly striking her with the knife. Charles reported that he was woken up by a noise and was initially disoriented due to intoxication. When he turned on the light, he was met with a disturbing scene. Morella's body had fallen to the floor beside the bed, where she had lost a significant amount of blood. Na entered the room, and both Charles and Na stood there for a few minutes, failing to provide any assistance to the victim. Once Charles regained his composure, he realized that he might be blamed for the crime due to his prior record, and that his influential acquaintances might avoid punishment. He claimed that this is why he agreed to help dispose of the body and conceal the crime. Charles stayed with friends for several days and, upon returning to collect his belongings, noticed that the blood stains on the floor and carpet had almost completely disappeared. Lisa informed him that she and Na had taken care of everything and destroyed the evidence of the crime. The three individuals involved decided it was best to leave town for a while and observe from a distance what would happen next. Lisa Dyke-Bell's defense team argued that she had no motive to harm she. According to her lawyer, Lisa's relationship with Chuck was purely professional, and she saw his music career as a valuable investment. She claimed that his personal relationships and interactions with others did not concern her. A key point made by her defense was that Lisa had recently gotten married to Moran and was happy in her relationship. However, it was unclear why she and her wife had decided to take the surname of their young lodger, Charles, after their wedding, despite claiming he was insignificant to them. During the trial, Lisa portrayed Charles as hot-tempered and cruel, especially when intoxicated, and stated that she feared him. Lisa's account of the events that night claims that Chuck brought a new woman home from the club, but their encounter turned violent when an argument broke out. Chuck allegedly grabbed a knife in a fit of rage. Lisa and Nina intervened, trying to separate them, but it was too late. Maricela was already dead. Chuck then coerced Lisa and Nina into helping him dispose of the body and clean up the crime scene, threatening to harm them if they didn't comply. However, a witness who testified in court, a friend of Lisa's, painted a different picture. According to the friend, Lisa was intensely fixated on Chuck and had often expressed a desire to get rid of any woman who got close to him. The friend suggested that Lisa's emotions got the better of her that night. The friend also mentioned a peculiar detail, a statue of Santa Muerte in Lisa's home, which was part of an improvised altar. Lisa had jokingly told her friend that she was into black magic and knew how to cast a spell to make a man loyal only to her. The ritual apparently did not work as planned, and she turned to using a knife instead. A real estate agent who was approached by the women shortly after the incident testified that they were desperate to sell several properties they owned as quickly as possible. They also wanted to put their home in Dallas up for sale, but were unable to do so while the investigation was ongoing because the house was a crime scene. The situation took a turn for the worse when the remains of she were found. At this point, Lisa and Nina were willing to sell the property at a significantly reduced price, just to get the money quickly. During the trial, the court considered Charles's full confession and his cooperation with the investigation. However, things took a turn for the worse for the fugitives after they attempted to flee to another continent. In March 2023, Lisa Dyke-Beltran was convicted of a heinous crime against 23-year-old Maricela, as well as tampering with evidence and attempting to escape. She received a life sentence with no possibility of parole. Charles Beltran and Nina Moran, on the other hand, pleaded guilty and cooperated with the investigation. They were found guilty of concealing evidence. Nina received a 7-year prison sentence, but may be eligible for release in 3 years if she exhibits good behavior. Charles, who had prior convictions, was sentenced to 12 years in prison with the possibility of parole after serving 8 years. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Lori Slasinski. Lori Slasinski, a 24 years old former Auburn University student, disappeared mysteriously on June 10, 2006, from Auburn, Alabama. Her disappearance occurred after she had confirmed plans to attend a girls' night out at her best friend and coworker's house home. However, she never arrived. Located in eastern Alabama, Auburn is a rapidly growing city with a rich cultural mix and a strong sense of Southern hospitality. It is home to Auburn University, one of the nation's most recognized public universities. Lori was born to parents Casey and Arlene Slasinski on September 21, 1981. She had blue eyes and blonde hair, and her parents and older brother, Paul, adored her. The investigation into Lori's disappearance began with a disturbing discovery. Her dog was left unattended, the air conditioner was still on, and the telephone cord was missing from her home. The police were baffled by the lack of evidence, and Lori's family was left with unanswered questions. Had Lori left town in a hurry, or was something more sinister at play? After 16 years, the mystery of Lori's disappearance was finally solved, but the events surrounding her vanishing remain as puzzling as ever. The family originally came from New York State but later relocated to rural Alabama farm country near Auburn when Lori was 13. Growing up in a country setting with animals, Lori developed a passion for animals. According to her friends, Lori was stunning and enjoyed spending time with friends, watching movies, riding her bicycle, and playing video games. In addition to these leisure activities, she was diligent in her studies and received support from her family. After completing high school, Lori attended Auburn University, majoring in psychology with a minor in criminology. Her parents purchased a mobile home for her in a well-maintained house park popular with students, where she lived off campus with her cherished Yorkshire Terrier, Peanut. Lori maintained a close relationship with her family, and her mother would call her daily to check in. In 2005, Lori graduated with honors from Auburn University. Following graduation, she secured a job at the East Alabama Mental Health Center while still residing in the house park. She also made plans to pursue her master's degree in psychology in the near future. Lori's family was proud of her accomplishments, but they had no idea that something terrible was about to happen. On June 10, 2006, 24-year-old Lori planned a girls' night at her best friend Lindsay Braun's house. They intended to have a few drinks and watch a movie. Lori and Lindsay had met in their junior year at Auburn University and quickly became friends due to Lori's kind, charming, and outgoing personality. After graduating, they both worked at the same mental health facility, which strengthened their bond. At around 6:30 p.m. on June 10th, Lori called Lindsay to say she needed to stop at the store before heading over for their movie night. Unfortunately, Lori never arrived. Lindsay became worried when she didn't hear from Lori again that night or the next day. She called Lori multiple times and left messages on her home answering machine, but Lori never responded. When Lori didn't show up to work on Monday, June 12th, Lindsay's concerns escalated. It was highly unusual for Lori to miss work without informing anyone. After Lori failed to show up to work on Tuesday, June 13th, Lindsay and another colleague visited Lori's home to check on her. When they arrived at the house, Lindsay found the door unlocked and the air conditioning on, which was unusual. Although Lori was nowhere to be found, her dog, Peanut, was in his crate, looking well-fed and content, as if someone had been caring for him. Surprisingly, his crate was clean, despite Lori having been missing for several days. Lindsay felt a sense of unease as she realized it was unusual for Lori to leave her beloved pet alone and unattended. She recalled that Lori had placed 3 rugs on her kitchen floor because the dog refused to walk on the tile. However, when Lindsay entered Lori's home later that day, the rugs were missing, along with the outside trash can. On the same day, June 13, 2006, Lori's mother, Arlene, received a call from Lori's workplace, informing her that Lori had missed work for 2 consecutive days. Arlene immediately tried to contact Lori but was unable to reach her. Growing concerned for her daughter's well-being, Arlene left for Auburn after alerting her husband, Casey, about Lori's disappearance. Upon arriving at Lori's house, Arlene encountered a disturbing scene. The door was slightly ajar, and Lori's bed was perfectly made, but there was no sign of Lori. Her car was also missing. A closer inspection revealed that several items were gone, including the kitchen rugs, a pillow from the couch, a Galileo thermometer, a green trash can that usually held a rake and shovel, and the phone cord for the landline. Arlene's alarm grew as she realized that something was horribly wrong. She officially reported her daughter missing, holding on to the hope that Lori would eventually show up. As the initial investigation into Lori's disappearance began, police searched her house home but found no significant evidence linking to a suspect. However, they did notice signs of a struggle, scuff marks on the wall, and semen on her bedsheet. Additionally, traces of blood were discovered on the doorknob, and a coat hanger and a single golden hoop earring were also found at the scene. On June 10, 2006, police recovered surveillance footage showing Lori stopping at a Walmart in Alabama. This was the last known sighting of her, and no one had any idea what happened to her after that. Later that afternoon, Lori's mother, Arlene, received a phone call from one of Lori's friends, 25-year-old Daryl Rick Ennis. Ennis claimed that he had met Lori on the day she went missing and thought she might have gone to make a drug deal. However, Arlene was skeptical of his story, despite knowing Ennis from when Lori invited him to spend Christmas with their family in 2005. Arlene couldn't believe that Lori would be involved in drug dealing and thought Ennis was lying, but she didn't know why he would make up such a story. Police received crucial information from Ennis himself. However, before they could investigate further, Lori's car was found engulfed in flames on a dead-end street near a bowling alley where Ennis used to work. This discovery, made on June 14, 2006, for days after Lori's disappearance, shifted the investigation from a missing persons case to a potential homicide. Unfortunately, the fire destroyed any potential evidence inside the car. Investigators found a hand-rolled cigarette near the vehicle and a gas can in the nearby woods, but Lori was not inside the car. Lori's family was devastated by the discovery, and they feared the worst. The only lead was the information Ennis had provided to Arlene. When questioned, Ennis repeated his story, adding more details. He claimed he and Lori grew marijuana together and speculated that she might have gone to sell her share. Ennis also suggested that Lori may have been involved with shady individuals. Police searched Lori's house thoroughly but found no evidence of her dealing drugs. During the investigation, they noticed scratches on Ennis's hands and arms, which he attributed to his dog. However, when they spoke to Lindsay, they uncovered more suspicious information. Lindsay reported that during her last phone conversation with Lori on the day she disappeared, she heard Rick Ennis speaking in the background. At the time, Lindsay didn't think much of it, as she knew Ennis was a friend of Lori's. Lindsay stated that when she asked Ennis about Lori's whereabouts via text, he replied that Lori was fine when he last saw her. Additionally, Lindsay told investigators that before Lori went missing, Lori mentioned that Ennis had written her a love letter, but Lori did not feel the same way. Lori had planned to talk to Ennis about her lack of romantic interest in him. Later, it was discovered that Ennis had told his friends about the love letter and Lori's rejection. When confronted with this new information, Ennis admitted to meeting Lori hours before her disappearance but claimed she was fine getting ready to go shopping when he left her house. However, investigators found inconsistencies in Ennis's statement, which raised suspicions. As a result, Rick Ennis became the prime suspect. The investigation led to a search of his car, where a knife, cleaning supplies, and handcuffs were found. Investigators kept collecting evidence by looking into Ennis's past, but they were about to encounter some unexpected surprises. Looking into Rick Ennis's dark past, investigators found that at the age of 12, he had murdered his mother and stepfather. The incident occurred on March 3, 1993, in North Montgomery, Alabama, where the family resided in a house. Ennis's mother, known for her kind and church-going nature, was first shot in the face and then beaten to death with a baseball bat. His stepfather, Eddie Joe Flowers, nicknamed Elvis due to his resemblance to the musician, met a similar fate. Upon returning home from work, Eddie was shot in the face with a shotgun by Rick. Following the murders, Ennis took the family car and crashed it into a fence along the highway. Alabama State Trooper John Clark encountered Ennis walking along the highway and inquired about his parents' whereabouts. Ennis confessed to killing them. A search of his backpack revealed a kitchen knife and ammunition for a 12-gauge shotgun and a .22 caliber. When questioned about his motives, the 12-year-old Ennis showed no emotion and explained that he was upset about his parents' plan to move, which would require him to change schools. Investigators believe Ennis lived with the bodies for 2 days, during which time he continued to attend school. He also confessed to planning to kill his 3 stepsisters, which shocked investigators. However, because of his age, he was tried as a minor and sentenced to 9 years in jail for the double murder. After his release, he moved to Auburn, where he met Lori Slasinski. Following Lori's disappearance, Ennis was the primary suspect, but without direct evidence for Lori's body, he couldn't be charged. Ennis left Auburn shortly after speaking with detectives and eventually settled in Huntsville, Alabama, in 2007. By then, Lori's case had gone cold. In Huntsville, Ennis moved in with Abram Sissons, telling him that he had kitchen rugs given to him by a woman from Auburn who had vanished, but didn't mention her name. Abram didn't suspect anything out of the ordinary about his conversations with Ennis until he discovered Ennis's dark past. At that point, Abram asked Ennis to leave right away. Later, Abram reported that his apartment was completely trashed when he returned. However, police were able to recover the rugs, and one of them tested positive for Ennis's blood. Abram also mentioned that he had seen a Galileo thermometer in Ennis's room before Ennis moved in with him, the same type that was missing from Lori's home. Unfortunately, even with this new information, the police were still unable to connect Ennis to Lori's murder at that time. As their main suspect remained at large, the case went unsolved, leaving Lori's distraught family waiting for answers. Years went by with no updates on the case. Then, in 2016, Mark Whitaker, a special agent with the Alabama State Bureau of Investigation, launched a cold case unit and reopened Lori's case. Alongside his team, including his longtime partner Agent J.W. Barnes, Lori's case was their top priority, and they began re-examining the evidence. They started sending evidence to forensic labs for testing and conducted multiple interviews. After re-examining the evidence, Ennis became the main suspect. Agent Mark suspected Ennis due to his past, but needed more evidence to prove his guilt. In a surprising turn of events, Agent Barnes discovered a crucial piece of evidence while reviewing old files. He found an unopened report from 2006 containing test results from Lori's house. The results revealed Rick Ennis's DNA on Lori's bed sheet and the front door. With all the evidence compiled, investigators built a strong case against Ennis, leading to an indictment in 2018. At that time, Ennis was living in Pilot, Virginia, engaged to Elena Atkinson, and working for a company that built portable living structures called yurts. On August 6, 2018, Rick Ennis was arrested by U.S. Marshals on his 38th birthday, 12 years after Lori Slasinski's disappearance from Auburn. The arrest brought relief to Lori's family but shocked Ennis's fiancée and co-workers. Initially charged with 2 counts of capital murder. The trial started on April 1, 2022. The prosecution presented evidence linking Ennis to the crime, including a cigarette but with his DNA found in Lori's bed sheet. However, the defense suggested that the police might have taken the cigarette from Ennis's home and planted it at the crime scene to frame him. The defense also attempted to discredit Lori Slasinski by implying she was involved in drug dealing, which could explain how Ennis's DNA ended up on the bed sheet. Ennis claimed he had consensual sex with Lori before she disappeared, suggesting they were intimate despite Lori previously rejecting his advances. Nevertheless, his account lacked credibility, especially after 2 additional witnesses came forward with crucial information. One of his former co-workers in Alabama, Jeremy Brooks, stated that Ennis called him on June 9, 2006, the day before Lori's disappearance. Ennis asked Jeremy to bring him gas and let him keep the gas tank, but Jeremy refused. According to Jeremy, Ennis claimed he had run out of gas and needed help getting some. Later, after Lori's burned car was found, a gas can matching the description of one missing from Ennis's workplace, a bowling alley, was discovered. Another former co-worker, Terry Booth from South Carolina, shared a disturbing experience she had with Ennis years earlier. When asked why he moved from Auburn, Ennis told her he had to dispose of a body. Although Ennis's comment was initially thought to be a joke, his arrest for Lori's murder proved it was not. Despite denying the allegations and maintaining his innocence, Ennis was found guilty after a 2-day jury deliberation. He faced the death penalty, but prosecutors agreed to drop the death penalty after consulting with Lori's mother, Arlene. Arlene later stated that she agreed to a life sentence without parole for Rick Ennis to avoid years of potential appeals and ensure Ennis would never be released. Ennis was sentenced to life without parole on April 14, 2022, and is currently incarcerated at the William E. Donaldson Correctional Facility in Bessemer, Alabama. The outcome was bittersweet for Arlene Slasinski. Tearfully, she acknowledged that it meant she had to accept that Lori would never return home, a hope her heart had held on to. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Tracy Hawlett and J.B. Beasley. J.B. Beasley, born on July 31, 1981, in Troy, Alabama, to parents Cheryl and Hilton Lanier Beasley. After her parents' separation, Beasley moved to Dothan with her mother in 1984. She was deeply loved by her mother and stepfather, Joey Begun, whom her mother married a few years later. Beasley grew up in a comfortable home in Dothan, Alabama, with her 4 sisters. She developed into a sociable young woman with a wide range of interests, including cheerleading, dance, piano, and swimming. She also worked as a model, along with her sisters, for several agencies. Despite her many pursuits, she valued time spent with friends and family. In high school, Beasley befriended Tracy Hawlett, a fellow cheerleader. They quickly became inseparable. Tracy Hawlett was born on March 3, 1982, to Carolyn and Robert Hawlett. Her father, a member of the Dothan Police Department, tragically passed away when Tracy was just 5 years old. Her mother, Carolyn, later remarried a man named Mike Roberts, who helped raise Tracy Hawlett alongside her mother. Tracy Hawlett was a shy but selfless person who always put others before herself. She was particularly protective of her 2 younger brothers and took her responsibilities as an older sister seriously. Like Beasley, Tracy Hawlett attended Northview High School, earning good grades and participating as a cheerleader. As Beasley and Tracy Hawlett were transitioning into adulthood, they were unaware of the tragic events that would soon shatter their hopes and dreams. On the evening of July 31, 1999, around 10:05 p.m., they friends left Dothan in J.B. Beasley's black 1993 Mazda 929, heading to a birthday party in Headland, just a few miles north. However, their unfamiliarity with the roads soon led them into difficulty. Beasley and Tracy Hallett started their trip but took a wrong turn shortly after leaving their hometown, becoming lost. At around 10:30 p.m., they stopped at a BP gas station in Headland, near the intersection of routes 173 and 431, to get directions. From the gas station's payphone, they called their friends to get clearer directions to their party destination. However, after continuing their trip, they found themselves in Ozark, Alabama, approximately 24 miles northwest of Headland, rather than their desired location. At 11:30 p.m., they realized they were still lost and pulled over at the Big Little store to get their bearings. Although the store was closed, Tracy Hallett used the payphone to call her mother, explaining that they had gotten lost and were now in Ozark. She updated her mother on their plans to return home rather than continue their search for the party. A woman named Marilyn Merrick and her daughters pulled into a gas station to buy a soda. Tracy Hallett and Beasley approached them, asking for directions to Dothan. Marilyn did her best to explain the route, and they seemed to grasp it. She noticed that they appeared to be well-mannered and were driving a clean and tidy car. As Marilyn watched, they followed her directions, pulling out of the parking lot and turning right. On August 1, 1999, Tracy Hallett's mother filed a missing person report with the police around 8 a.m. Investigators quickly began searching for Tracy Hallett and her friend, Beasley, who had not been seen since the previous night. Their first lead came when police discovered Beasley's car parked on Herring Avenue in Ozark. The vehicle showed signs of recent use, with an almost empty gas tank despite being filled the day before. The car was also dirty and had a partially rolled down driver's side window, yet the doors were locked with no signs of forced entry. Inside, police found Beasley's driver's license on the dashboard, along with 8 purses and cash, which suggested that the disappearance was not a result of a typical theft or robbery. The investigation into She's initially focused on finding Beasley's car keys, as they were the only reported missing item. However, there was no sign of either Tracy Hallett or Beasley. A suspicious palm print on the locked trunk of Beasley's car heightened the police's concerns that something was terribly wrong. Although they suspected the trunk might hold important clues, they couldn't access it without the keys. It took 6 hours for the police to realize that the trunk could be opened from the inside using a latch, eliminating the need for the car key or a locksmith. Upon opening the trunk, the officers made a disturbing discovery. The lifeless bodies of the girls were found inside. Both victims were fully dressed, but their pants were soiled below the waist. Each girl had a single gunshot wound to the head, with Tracy Hallett shot in the temple and Beasley in the right cheek. Tracy Hallett had suffered injuries consistent with a violent struggle, including a 9mm shell casing lodged on her leg, scratches on her arm, and thornbriars tangled in her jeans. Despite the gruesome nature of the crime, investigators believed that they were likely killed while inside the trunk of the car, and that their deaths were not the result of a random attack, but rather an intentional act. As the families of the victims were notified of the tragic discovery, the authorities formally launched a homicide investigation. Initially, detectives considered robbery as a possible motive, but this theory was quickly dismissed when they found that the victims' personal belongings, including purses, jewelry, money, and credit cards, were still inside the car. Autopsies revealed that they had no alcohol or drugs in their system, and there was no evidence of sexual assault. This led investigators to rule out the possibility that the crime was motivated by sex. However, a subsequent report from the State Crime Lab, issued more than 2 months later, found traces of unknown semen on Tracy Hallett's clothing and skin. The palm print found on the trunk lid remained unidentified, with no matches in the database and no suspect to compare it to. As a result, authorities had limited leads to pursue. Despite the widespread attention the double murder of the teenagers received, investigators were no closer to identifying a suspect. A month after the discovery of Beasley and Tracy Hollett's bodies, a surprising breakthrough occurred. Johnny William Barentine, a 28-year-old Ozark resident, visited the Ozark Police Department on September 1st and shared a remarkable account. He claimed to have witnessed the double murder, stating that he had seen the incident on the same night as the crimes, around the time Tracy Hollett made a call from the Big Little Store's payphone. According to Barentine, he had been out buying milk for his 2-year-old son when he stumbled upon the horrific event. He returned home at 1 a.m., visibly upset, and told his wife that he had been in a collision with a black truck near Herring Road. After sharing this incident with friends in the days that followed Tracy Hollett and Beasley's murder, they encouraged him to report it to the police. They suggested that this information might be connected to the murders and could help the police solve the case, ultimately leading to the reward. During a 4-hour interview with Ozark Police, Barentine's account of the events surrounding the killings changed 6 times. Initially, he told police that on the night of the murders, he saw a black truck speeding away from the area where the bodies were found. However, as the interview progressed, his story continued to evolve and change. Eventually, Barentine claimed that he had given a ride to a tattooed man he didn't know, and they drove past the Big Little Store together. He then testified that the man got into the car with 2 girls, whom he identified as Tracy Hollett and Beasley. According to Barentine, the man forced they out of the car on Herring Avenue. A confrontation took place between the man and they as they tried to escape. After putting they in the trunk, Barentine reported seeing something in the man's hands just before hearing 2 gunshots. The man then returned to the car, and Barentine drove him away from the scene before heading home. In a different account, Barentine confessed to investigators that he knew the man he had given a ride to and identified him as his neighbor. Notably, Barentine lived less than a mile from where the police found the victims' bodies. Johnny Barentine was named the prime suspect in the murders of Beasley and Tracy Hollett, but his story raised several red flags. He failed to mention any sexual activity that would explain the semen found on Beasley's clothing and body. Additionally, the neighbor he implicated had a solid alibi for the time of the crime. Barentine's appearance in his mugshot also seemed suspicious, as he looked startled and disheveled, as if he had just been awoken from a deep sleep. Despite these inconsistencies, police initially believed they had the right person. However, Barentine soon confessed that he had fabricated his entire story to collect the reward money. Surprisingly, at the preliminary hearing on September 21st, Alabama Bureau of Investigation agent Charles Huggins testified that Barentine was able to accurately describe her clothing and other details consistent with the crime scene, which suggested that he may have had some knowledge of the events. After his arrest, Barentine was held in the Dale County Jail in Ozark without the possibility of bail. At a bond hearing on October 18th, Barentine claimed he was not involved in the killings. He told the judge that he had not picked up a tattooed man and had not witnessed anything on the night of the murders. According to Barentine, he had gone to the BP station around 11 p.m. to buy milk for his child and later fabricated a story to collect the reward money. The judge denied Barentine's request for bond, and he returned to jail. Despite the challenges, Barentine's family continued to support him. They gave interviews to the media, stating that he was innocent and incapable of harming anyone. Barentine's lawyer, Bill Kimmons, also maintained his client's innocence, stating that the prolonged interrogation had taken a toll on him, causing him to become entangled in his own web of deceit. During police questioning, Barentine was not informed that he was free to leave or use the bathroom at any time. His defense team highlighted that he had limited education, having only completed the 7th grade and part of the 8th grade, and was in special education classes, which suggested he lacked the capacity to plan a complex crime. He was eventually released from jail on December 17, 1999, when DNA evidence revealed that his DNA did not match the semen found on the victim's body and clothing. In January 2000, a grand jury in Dale County declined to indict Barentine, effectively clearing him as a suspect in the double murder. The investigation suffered a setback after Barentine's clearance, and the methods used by investigators were criticized. Questions arose about the Ozark Police Department's ability to handle the case. Despite this, the police still had several potential suspects under consideration. A Michigan man was considered a key suspect due to his proximity to the scene and suspicious behavior. He was in the area on the night of the murders and attended a party near where Beasley's car was found. Within days, he left town, raising suspicions. Investigators made 3 trips to Michigan to interview him, but he was unable to provide a solid alibi for hours on the night of the murder. Police were initially interested in 2 key leads, a person of interest whose DNA didn't match the crime scene, and a driver of a small white pickup truck captured on surveillance footage. The video showed the truck at the gas pumps at the same time the victims, Beasley and Tracy Hallett, were nearby at the payphone. However, no record of a gas purchase existed, and the video was of poor quality, making it impossible to clearly identify the driver or determine if anyone got out of the truck. The police released a photo of the truck a month later, asking for the public's help in identifying the driver. Unfortunately, no one came forward with any information, and the lead eventually disappeared. The investigation's last lead was a man from Mississippi who had been arrested in Jones County on an outstanding warrant for possessing drug paraphernalia. He had been visiting relatives in Ozark, but departed 2 days after the murders. Investigators wanted to question him, but ultimately, he provided no significant information. Due to lack of evidence, they were forced to release him. In March 2000, a woman came forward, claiming she heard screams and 2 gunshots near Highway 123 South, just inside the city limits, on the night of the murders. She admitted she had been scared to report it earlier. Police searched the area based on her description and found a 9mm bullet, the same type used to kill they. However, the bullet's brand did not match the brand of the bullet shell casing found on Tracy's body. The unspent bullet found no useful markings for forensic comparison to other evidence, ruling out another potential lead in the case. Despite this and other dead ends over the years, investigators remained hopeful for a DNA match. As the families of Beasley and Tracy Hallett tried to move on with their lives, the case eventually went cold. Years later, new information rekindled the investigation. In 2015, a bombshell accusation shook the case. Rena, an auxiliary police officer with the Ozark Police Department, came forward and publicly accused a fellow officer of murdering Beasley and Tracy Hallett and implicated others in a cover-up. Rena made several disturbing allegations regarding the Ozark Police Department. She claimed that on July 31, 1999, a police officer stopped Beasley and demanded to know the location of cassette tapes containing incriminating conversations about the police department's involvement in cocaine trafficking. According to Rena, this confrontation led to the tragic murder of 2 innocent teenagers. Rena further alleged that she was threatened by multiple law enforcement officials who knew the identity of the murderer but helped cover up the crime by destroying evidence. Specifically, Rena accused 3 officers, Gary Butch Whittington, Rex Tipton, and Eddie Henderson, of harassing and intimidating her. She also implicated the former police chief, Tony Spivey, who led the original investigation, in the cover-up. However, Rena declined to reveal the name of the officer she believed was directly responsible for the murders. American journalist John B. Carroll wrote that the officer likely assumed they girls planned to use the tapes as evidence in a court case set for August 2, 1999, just over a day after their murders. Carroll also reported that Rena was brutally beaten with a baseball bat after coming forward, which prevented her from revealing the actual killer. Law enforcement officials accused by Rena denied any involvement in the murders of Beasley and Tracy Howlett. Due to a lack of physical evidence, none of the officials were ever formally named as suspects in the case. Despite this, online allegations against them spread quickly on true crime websites and social media. As a result, Keith Coffin, Rex Tipton, Tony Spivey, Eddie Henderson, and Gary Butch Whittington from the Ozark, Alabama Police Department sued Rena Crum, John B. Carroll for defamation in 2016. The case was later dismissed in 2018. In May 2016, Rena Crum was convicted of harassing Beasley's sister over several years and received a suspended sentence and a $250 fine. Despite an extensive investigation that spanned 2 decades, including numerous interviews and DNA samples, authorities were unable to identify a suspect. It wasn't until 2019 that advances in DNA technology finally led to a breakthrough. In March 2019, investigators sent the DNA evidence found on Beasley's body in clothes to a specialized lab in Virginia called Parabon Nano. The lab used public genealogy databases to analyze the DNA and found a match, leading them to identify a suspect named Coley McCraney. McCraney, 45, was not previously a suspect in the 1999 murders of Beasley and Tracy Howlett, but DNA evidence now implicated him in the crime. McCraney was born in Alabama and graduated from Carroll High School in Ozark in 1992. During his time in high school, he was an athlete and also served as the president of the library club. After graduation, he enlisted in the U.S. Air Force and served from 1993 to 1997. In 1992, McCraney was married, but they separated 2 years later. They eventually divorced. His ex-wife filed a complaint with the Air Force in 1994, alleging that McCraney had assaulted her. McCraney later remarried in 2001 and had children with his second wife. In 1998, he was found to have failed to pay child support, but otherwise, he had no significant criminal record over the past 20 years. McCraney worked as a truck driver throughout his career, employed by several Alabama-based trucking companies over the years. More recently, he co-founded a church and worked as a bishop. At the time of the 1999 murders, Coley McCraney was 26 years old and living in Ozark, just 1 mile from where the bodies of Beasley and Tracy Howlett were found. Nearly 20 years later, on March 15, 2019, McCraney was arrested in Daleville, Alabama, following a traffic stop. During his subsequent interview with police, McCraney claimed to not know the victims. However, the investigators did not reveal any motive for the murders. The news of McCraney's arrest sent shockwaves through the Ozark community, including its police chief, Marlon Walker, who had attended school with McCraney. As the case seemed to be finally unraveling, a new development emerged. Rena Crum, a 53-year-old woman who had previously accused the Ozark Police Department of covering up the murder, withdrew her allegations during an August 2022 hearing. McCraney, 49, is currently in Dale County Jail awaiting trial on 5 counts of capital murder for the shooting deaths of Beasley and Tracy Howlett. His bond was denied, and his trial is scheduled for April 17, 2023. The families of the victims expressed relief that the alleged killer has been apprehended, but they still face the difficult process of reliving painful memories during the trial. McCraney was ultimately found guilty of the murder and rape of Beasley and the murder of Howlett. He was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Daniel Wozniak. Sam Herr was born to parents Stephen and Raquel Kalberman on May 29, 1983, in Los Angeles, California. As their only child, Sam Herr was showered with love and attention from his parents, his father being a special education teacher and his mother a stay-at-home parent. Sam Herr maintained a close relationship with his parents even after he moved away. Despite his physically imposing stature, Sam Herr's friends affectionately referred to him as a gentle giant, describing him as a fun-loving and laid-back individual. Sam Herr enlisted in the United States Army at a young age and completed tours of duty in Afghanistan and Germany as part of the 173rd Airborne. After serving for 3 years, he was honorably discharged and returned to Southern California to pursue higher education using the GI Bill. His goal was to complete college and then re-enlist in the Army as an officer. To achieve this, Sam enrolled in Orange Coast Community College, where he befriended Julie Kibushi, who was 3 years his junior. However, Sam Herr struggled with the emotional aftermath of his military service, ultimately developing post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, a common affliction among veterans. When 28-year-old Sam Herr failed to visit his parents' house over a weekend as planned, they began to worry. Sam Herr's parents, Stephen and Raquel, became increasingly concerned after several attempts to contact their son went unanswered. Deciding to take matters into their own hands, Stephen went to Sam Herr's apartment in Costa Mesa with his wife to see what was amiss. Their discovery led to immediate panic when they could not find their son and only saw Julie Kibushi in a state of horror. Stephen quickly dialed 911 as Raquel choked and screamed. The moment they realized Julie had met a gruesome end, they knew their lives would never be the same, and the trauma would have a lasting impact. The Costa Mesa community was shocked by the incident, as murders are rare there. At the apartment, police found no signs of a disturbance. The bedroom, however, presented a disturbing scene. On the bedside table, investigators found an unused knife, as well as 2 books, a combat manual and a sex guide. But it was the condition of the bed that was truly horrifying. The bed was soaked in the Julie Kibushi's blood, and the deceased Julie Kibushi was found in a compromising position, partially lying on the bed and partially kneeling on the floor. Her pants had been pulled down, exposing her lower body, leading detectives to suspect that she may have been sexually assaulted before her murder. The autopsy revealed that she had suffered 2 gunshot wounds to the head, with 1 bullet entering the top center of her skull. Although a knife was found on the bedside table, it appeared to have been unused. Other unusual details included a tiara on the victim's head and the words, "All yours," scrawled on the back of Julie Kibushi's sweater. Julie Kibushi handbag was found in the kitchen. The detectives identified the victim as 23-year-old Julie Kibushi, who was born on Valentine's Day in 1987 to a Japanese-American family. She was the first daughter and third of 4 children to parents June and Masa Kibushi. Her parents affectionately called her "my Valentine girl" from a young age. Julie Kibushi developed a passion for tap dancing at the age of 5, which continued to grow throughout her life. Those who knew her described her as a joyful person to be around, with a goofy and bubbly personality that could light up a room. Julie Kibushi was known for her kindness and willingness to go out of her way to help others. Julie Kibushi's life was a balance between her Japanese heritage and her independent American spirit. She had recently graduated from the Orange County School of the Arts and was pursuing a degree in fashion design at Orange Coast Community College. There, she befriended 26-year-old Sam Herr and even tutored him in anthropology. Little did she know, her kindness would ultimately lead to her tragic demise. The police investigation into Julie Kibushi's murder was underway. Detectives meticulously examined the crime scene, searching for clues that would reveal the truth about her final moments. Their attention turned to Sam Herr, as Julie Kibushi's body was found in his apartment. His sudden disappearance further raised suspicions. With evidence pointing to Sam Herr's involvement, investigators decided to take a closer look at him. Detectives suspected that Samher had committed the crime in a moment of passion and then fled. This theory was supported by the fact that Samher was nowhere to be found after the murder of Julie Kibushi in his apartment. The discovery of text messages from Samher's number on Julie Kibushi's phone further fueled their suspicions. Initially, the messages seemed innocuous, with Samher sending Julie Kibushi a text at 2:45 p.m. on May 21, 2010, telling her he would help a friend and then visit his parents. However, just 2 hours later, his messages took a drastic turn, as he frantically asked Julie Kibushi to come to his apartment. However, investigators interpreted these messages as evidence of Samher's guilt, arguing that he had planned for Julie Kibushi to visit his apartment, which ultimately led to the murder. The disappearance of several key items from the apartment hinted at Samher's possible flight. His passport and car were both missing, leading investigators to a straightforward conclusion: Samher was on the run and likely the prime suspect in the crime. As the investigation continued, the Costa Mesa police tracked Samher's cell phone and credit card activity to pinpoint his location. They discovered that his credit card had been used for 4 ATM withdrawals and a purchase at a pizza delivery place in Long Beach, California, just 20 miles from Sam's home. Police anticipated that Samher would appear in the surveillance footage of the ATM. However, when the bank provided the footage, the police were shocked to see a teenager wearing a hoodie, not Samher, withdrawing money from his account. Neither the police nor Samher's parents could identify the mysterious boy. Investigators believed he was probably helping Samher escape or hide. In either case, the Costa Mesa police were determined to find him. On May 26, 2010, they discovered that his credit card had been used for another pizza delivery, and they began tracing the delivery driver. Police went to an address provided by a tipster, expecting to catch Samher, but instead found 17-year-old Wesley Freilich and his friends. Although initially suspected, authorities quickly cleared Wesley's name. However, they discovered that he possessed Samher's credit card. Wesley told investigators a surprising story. He had been given the credit card by Daniel Wozniak, a local theater actor who had met Wesley through community theater. Daniel Wozniak claimed to be a bail bondsman and said he needed help collecting money from Samher. Believing Wozniak's story, Wesley agreed to withdraw cash using the credit card, unaware of the true circumstances. A total of $1,900 was withdrawn from the account, sparking further investigation. The name Daniel Wozniak was familiar to investigators, who had previously found an invitation to his upcoming wedding in Samher's apartment. This raised several questions. Who was Daniel Wozniak, and what was his connection to Samher? Was he involved in helping Samher escape, or was he a more sinister accomplice to the murder? These questions needed to be answered. To understand Daniel Wozniak's potential role, investigators looked into his background. Born on March 23, 1984, Daniel Wozniak was the youngest of 3 brothers. Due to his parents' demanding work schedules, he spent a significant amount of time with his grandparents after school. Daniel Wozniak grew up in a privileged household and was accustomed to luxury. Daniel Wozniak's journey to becoming an actor began in his early 20s. Despite struggling to hold down a job and often having to move to low-paying positions, his passion for acting and singing in musicals kept him going. It was during this time that he met his future wife, a fellow actress, and they eventually got married. However, their happiness was short-lived. On May 26, 2010, the day of Daniel Wozniak's bachelor party in Huntington Beach, California, police arrived with an arrest warrant. This unexpected turn of events linked Daniel Wozniak to the murder of Julie Kibushi, as it turned out that Samher, the suspected killer, lived in the same apartment complex as Daniel Wozniak. Authorities believed that Daniel Wozniak may have helped Samher escape or hide, leading them to assume he was involved in the crime. Police arrested and questioned Daniel Wozniak. Initially, during interrogation, Daniel Wozniak claimed that his only wrongdoing was credit card fraud and that he had covered for his friend Sam Herr. He explained to investigators that he, Sam Herr, and Wesley had planned to withdraw all of his money from the bank and then report the credit cards as stolen. Daniel Wozniak claims he dropped Sam Herr off at a local mall. Detectives remained skeptical, however, believing that Daniel Wozniak was still protecting Sam Herr and had more to do with Julie Kibushi's murder than he had let on. In an effort to uncover the truth, police asked Wozniak to provide a DNA sample, a request that made him nervous. Detectives noticed Daniel Wozniak's nervous behavior when questioned about his DNA being found at Sam Herr's apartment, despite his attempts to act nonchalant. As the pressure mounted, he began to alter his story repeatedly. Eventually, Daniel Wozniak cracked and admitted he knew about Julie Kibushi's murder and had helped the perpetrator escape. However, when reminded that his DNA had been collected, he insisted it would not match any evidence found on Julie Kibushi's body, clinging to the claim of his innocence. Just as detectives were expecting Daniel Wozniak to reveal more information, he abruptly ended the interview. The detectives, determined to uncover the truth, informed Daniel Wozniak that he would be arrested as an accessory to murder if he didn't provide a full account of his involvement. Daniel Wozniak, who was scheduled to get married in just 48 hours, was caught between revealing the truth and avoiding arrest, which would ruin his wedding plans. Under intense questioning, Daniel Wozniak's story began to unravel. Detectives sensed his weakness and accelerated the process by falsely claiming that DNA evidence linked him to Julie Kibushi's body. They misled him, as DNA test results would not be available for weeks. Instead of disputing the claim, Daniel Wozniak surprisingly explained that his DNA would be on Julie Kibushi's body because he was near her. This inconsistent response raised suspicions. As Daniel Wozniak's lies continued to crumble, he made a stunning revelation, which was particularly alarming to detectives because they had initially observed only one gunshot wound at the crime scene. It wasn't until the autopsy was performed that a second gunshot wound was discovered, casting further doubt on Daniel Wozniak's credibility. Daniel Wozniak's confession implicated him as an accomplice to the murder, allowing investigators to formally detain him. However, detectives still needed to locate Sam Herr, and Daniel Wozniak refused to cooperate. Despite being in custody, Daniel Wozniak made a phone call to his fiancée, Rachel Buffett. Unbeknownst to Daniel Wozniak, the conversation was being recorded, which would eventually ensnare him in his own deceit. Rachel decided to prioritize her freedom over her relationship and informed Daniel Wozniak that she would share more information with the detectives. Realizing he needed to act swiftly, Daniel Wozniak became frantic and sought to negotiate a deal with the detectives, a reversal of his stance just hours earlier. Daniel Wozniak revealed a shocking account to the detectives, detailing his sinister murder plan. It began with a seemingly innocuous request to a friend, Sam Herr, whom he considered trustworthy. On May 21, 2010, Daniel Wozniak asked Sam Herr to help him move boxes at the Los Alamitos Theater attic, located on a local military base. Sam Herr was initially unaware of what had happened. When he realized he had been shot, he begged Daniel Wozniak for help. However, Daniel Wozniak showed no mercy. Without hesitation, he reloaded the gun and shot Sam Herr a second time, killing him instantly. The suspect brutally murdered Sam Herr and didn't stop there. He then used Sam Herr's phone to text Julie Kibushi, luring her to Sam Herr's apartment. He left Sam Herr's body in the attic later that night. The suspect snuck into Sam Herr's apartment, where Julie Kibushi had fallen into his trap. He then shot Julie Kibushi twice in the head. Daniel Wozniak altered the crime scene to make people think Sam Herr was the culprit, and he fled after attacking and killing Julie Kibushi. However, Daniel Wozniak realized that he still had to hide Sam Hare's body. Daniel Wozniak went back to the attic and cut off Sam Hare's hands and head to make it harder to identify the body. He then got rid of these body parts in a nearby park. Despite his gruesome actions, Daniel Wozniak appeared to be unaffected and returned to the theater, where he was seen laughing and joking with others in several photos taken at cast parties, which were later found by detectives. The underlying motive for the murders was surprisingly straightforward: money. Daniel Wozniak's financial struggles were well documented, with 2 months of unpaid rent threatening his eviction and no means to fund the lavish wedding and honeymoon he had planned. However, his situation changed dramatically when he discovered that Sam Hare had $62,000 in savings from his military service. This revelation sparked a sinister plan, and Daniel Wozniak brutally murdered 2 innocent people in cold blood, all to fund his own extravagant celebrations. The bag containing crucial evidence against Daniel Wozniak was meant to be disposed of by his brother Tim, but Tim threw it over their parents' fence instead. The bag held incriminating items like bloody clothing, a weapon, and victim Sam Hare's records and passport, all with Daniel's DNA. This treasure trove of evidence helped secure a quick conviction, with Daniel found guilty of 2 counts of first-degree murder on December 16, 2015. On January 11, 2016, the jury in Daniel Wozniak's trial recommended the death penalty after only 1 hour of deliberation, a remarkably short time for such a serious decision. The judge later sentenced Daniel Wozniak to death on September 23, 2016. Years after the trial, detectives discovered that Rachel Buffett, Daniel Wozniak's former fiancée, had been aware of the murder plots and had misled investigators. Despite her denials, Rachel Buffett was arrested and charged with 3 felony counts of accessory after the fact for allegedly lying to the police on multiple occasions. On September 12, 2018, Rachel Buffett was found guilty of 2 serious charges, which carried a maximum sentence of 44 months in prison. As a result, she received a 32-month prison sentence on November 8, 2018. She was eventually released in 2019. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Linda Sladen. Linda Patterson Sladen was born on March 8, 1950. At 16, she became pregnant with her first son, Jeff, and 3 years later, her second son, Tim. To build a stable family, she convinced her boyfriend, Frank Sladen, to marry her. Unfortunately, the marriage turned out to be disastrous. Frank's alcoholism addiction led to routine abuse of Linda and their sons. Jeff and Tim remember their father's violent behavior, which was triggered by his drinking. The abuse was so severe that Linda considered divorce, and in 1974, she finally escaped the toxic marriage. After 9 tumultuous years, Linda divorced Frank and started a new life as a single mother to her 2 teenage sons. Despite financial struggles and limited resources, she worked hard to provide for her family and be a caring presence in her sons' lives. Without a car, Jeff and Tim often walked to school or relied on others for rides. Jeff and Tim loved playing football, but they didn't have a ride to practice, so their coach, Coach Joseph, would often give them a lift to and from their home. Around the same time, Linda was preparing her home for her mother's visit. She wanted her mother to move in, hoping her presence would help tidy up the house and make it feel more welcoming. Linda's sister Judy would often visit her, and they would spend their time chatting over coffee. However, on September 4, 1981, Judy arrived at Linda's apartment around 8:30 a.m. to find something shocking. The night before, on September 3, 1981, Jeff had come home from football practice to find no food, so he went to his grandparents' place. He returned home around 9:30 p.m. to find the house empty. Later, around 11:30 p.m., Linda and her younger son Tim came home. Linda had been at a neighbor's place playing cards, and before that, she had done some household chores. Jeff saw his mom doing the dishes while Tim went to bed. Jeff apologized to his mom for their earlier argument, and they made up before Linda said goodnight to her boys. Jeff's last words to his mother were, "I love you, Mom, I'll see you tomorrow," but tragically, that would be the last conversation they would ever have. On September 4, 1981, at around 8:30 a.m., Judy visited Linda's apartment. When she knocked on Linda's bedroom door, there was no response. This was unusual, as Linda typically woke up before the boys left for school. Judy thought maybe Linda was still asleep, but as she turned to leave, she noticed something odd. The window in Linda's room was open, and the sheet that usually covered it was missing. Judy's concern grew, and she knocked on the door again. This time, she opened it and was met with a horrific sight: Linda's lifeless body on the floor, a wire clothes hanger wrapped around her neck. Linda was partially undressed, and her cupboard was wide open, but there were no signs of a struggle. Everything else in the room was in its usual place. Judy's scream alerted a nearby caretaker, who immediately called 911. Within minutes, the police, news reporters, and medical services arrived at the scene. The area was quickly cordoned off. Tim and Jeff were abruptly awakened by police officers, who then asked them to leave their home, which had become a crime scene. Jeff managed to avoid seeing his lifeless mother by passing by her room quickly, but Tim caught a glimpse of her for the last time. The two boys were subsequently sent to live with their grandparents while the investigation continued. Tragically, their mother, Linda, had been murdered at the age of 31. As soon as the boys had left, Sergeant Edgar Pickett of the Lakeland Police Department arrived at the crime scene to take charge of the case. He played a crucial role in the investigation and discovered vital evidence. Upon beginning his examination of the scene, Sergeant Pickett found several fingerprints in Linda's bedroom. While most belonged to the victim, one print did not match Linda's appeared. A palm print was discovered on the windowsill of Linda Slayton's bedroom, the same window that was missing a sheet, sparking an investigation into her death. An autopsy revealed multiple bruises and marks on her arms, shoulders, and neck, and her partially naked body suggested possible sexual assault. The autopsy results confirmed that Linda was brutally beaten, sexually assaulted, and then strangled to death with a metal clothes hanger from her own closet. The palm print found on the windowsill was a crucial piece of evidence, but unfortunately, forensic DNA analysis was not available at the time. As a result, the police had to explore Linda's family tree to identify potential suspects. The primary suspect was Frank Slayton, Linda's ex-husband, who had a history of aggression and abuse. In 1975, during their divorce, Linda described Frank as having an aggressive nature and being neglectful of his family. He was brought in for questioning, but an alibi checked out, placing him at home in Alabama on the night of Linda's murder. The police also had other individuals in mind. One of them was Jeff Slayton, Linda's son. The reason for this was a heated argument between Jeff and his mother that occurred before her murder. As the eldest son, Jeff had a complex relationship with his mother, having grown up in a household with an abusive father and later a single mother. Although Jeff and his mother frequently argued, they always managed to make amends. On the night of the murder, Jeff had made up with his mother before going to bed. When questioned by the police, Jeff passed 2 polygraph tests, which led to his name being cleared from the list of suspects. By September 2001, the police were struggling to find new leads in the case, nearly a year after the murder. However, things took a turn when they received information about a 24-year-old man who was reportedly involved in a similar crime, reigniting their investigation. Jimmy Ulmer was a suspect in Linda's murder case due to a previous crime where he attempted to abduct a 10-year-old girl through her bedroom window. A police check revealed that Ulmer had received an 80-year prison sentence, and his crimes bore a striking resemblance to Linda's case. Furthermore, Ulmer had been living in the same apartment complex as Linda at the time of the murder. The evidence against him made Ulmer the prime suspect, but he died during the investigation, making a DNA match impossible without exhuming his body. Fortunately, Ulmer's mother allowed the authorities to collect a DNA sample from him, but the results did not match. With Ulmer ruled out, the investigation turned to other potential suspects, but no one was ever charged. Despite looking into other leads, the case eventually went cold. The Slayton brothers, Linda's children, were now left to cope with the loss of their mother, relying solely on their grandparents, Clarence and Margaret Harris, for support. After Linda passed away, her family held a funeral and gradually returned to their normal routines. Her sons went back to school, and as time went by, they began to heal and move on from what had happened. Tim eventually started playing football again, and he found comfort in the support of his teammates and coach Joseph, who would often give him rides to and from practice. Tim put up a photo of his team in his bedroom, which became a source of motivation for him to keep moving forward and overcome his challenges. After their mother's death, the young Slayton brothers grew into men who built loving families of their own. Jeff got married and had 2 children, while Tim also started a family. As the years passed, both brothers regularly checked in with the Lakeland investigators to see if there were any updates on their mother's case. By 1998, Sergeant Edgar Pickett had left the case, and a new investigation team took over. Detective Brad Grace was assigned to the Slayton case and began reviewing the evidence. He discovered unidentified DNA from the 1981 crime scene and sent it to the Florida Department of Law Enforcement's Major Crime Lab for analysis. By 1999, the lab had successfully developed a full DNA profile of the killer. In 2001, Detective Grace reviewed the list of suspects in the Slayton case, determined to collect DNA samples from each one. He arranged a meeting with the Slayton brothers and collected their DNA samples, which were sent for further testing. However, the results revealed no match with the DNA profile of the suspected murderer. After clearing Jeff's name, Detective Grace turned his attention to Frank Slayton. Frank had since quit drinking and appeared to have overcome his aggressive tendencies, even reconnecting with his sons, Tim and Jeff. Frank agreed to submit his DNA for testing, but it did not match the DNA profile. Detective Grace attempted to find a match for the unidentified DNA profile by submitting it to the FBI's National DNA Database in 2005. Over the years, he eliminated dozens of suspects through DNA evidence, but he retired in 2015 after 17 years on the case. The case was then assigned to new detectives, Tommy Hathcock and Russell Hurley. Detective Tommy made a significant breakthrough in the investigation 3 years in, when they discovered that the Florida Department of Law Enforcement had developed a cutting-edge technology that could help identify unidentifiable DNA. She immediately sent the unidentified DNA from the Slayton case to a genetic genealogist, who uploaded it to a public genealogy website called GMatch. The website, run by Moore, produced a list of people who shared DNA with the killer. Moore then used birth certificates, marriage certificates, obituaries, and social media to build a genetic family tree. As she dug deeper, she created 3 branches of the family tree that led to a single individual who was likely responsible for Linda Slayton's murder. The DNA profile and family tree pointed to one person, Joseph Clinton Mills, also known as Coach Joseph. In a shocking twist, it turned out that Joseph was a familiar face to the Slayton family. His picture even hung on Tim's bedroom wall, with Joseph standing just above Tim's shoulder. Upon learning the killer's name, detectives Tommy and Russell began investigating Joseph Mills' background. They uncovered a history of crimes, including grand theft committed through forging a will. Although Joseph was never charged for this crime, the police had collected his palm and fingerprints. Significantly, a palm print matching Joseph was found on the windowsill at the crime scene by Sergeant Edgar Pickett. The family of the deceased might finally find closure in a cold case that had been open for over 40 years. To confirm their suspicions, investigators compared the palm prints taken from Linda Slayton's windowsill in 1981 to the suspect's palm print and found a match. However, they still needed to compare a recent DNA sample from the suspect to the DNA evidence from the Slayton case. To do this without alerting the suspect, detectives decided to obtain his DNA for testing without his knowledge. To gather evidence, investigators took garbage bags from Joseph Mills's house and searched them at the police station for items that could contain his DNA. While sorting through the trash, they found a piece of medical adhesive tape in one of the bags and sent it to the crime lab for testing. As they awaited the DNA results, the detectives looked into Joseph's private life. He was a 58-year-old married man with children and grandchildren who had spent most of his life in Kathleen, Florida, just 30 minutes from the crime scene. 2 weeks later, the crime lab results came in, revealing that the unknown DNA found at the scene matched the DNA on the medical adhesive tape. In December 2019, detectives arrested Joseph and brought him in for questioning. It was discovered that Joseph was only around 20 years old when he committed the crime in 1981. Police had spoken to him over the phone just a day after the murder, but Joseph had told investigators that he had dropped the victim off after football practice on the night of September 3, 1981, the evening before the murder. The police did not initially suspect Joseph, but he eventually became a person of interest. During questioning, Joseph claimed that Linda Slayton had invited him over for consensual sex. However, investigators thought this was a fabricated story. They suspected that Joseph had actually targeted Linda before the night of the murder, partly because he had frequently given her son, Tim, rides to and from football practice, and also because he had been seen lingering around the Slaytons' residence. According to Joseph's statement, on the night of September 3, 1981, after dropping Tim off at his house after football practice, Joseph returned to the Slaytons' residence when no one was home. He broke in through Linda's bedroom window and hid in her closet until she went to bed. Once she was asleep, Joseph emerged from the closet, beat, sexually assaulted, and ultimately strangled Linda using a wire hanger from her closet. Joseph Mills was found guilty of first-degree murder and sexual battery. During his sentencing, family members of the victim, Linda Slayton, confronted him and demanded to know why he committed the crime. However, Joseph failed to provide any explanation or apology, simply stating, "I am a good person." The judge sentenced Joseph to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Although the Slayton family found some comfort in knowing that Joseph will spend the rest of his life behind bars, they were still outraged that he was able to live freely for so many years while they suffered without their mother. Tim, Linda's son, was particularly shocked by the revelation. Joseph had been a role model and coach to him, and Tim had looked up to him. However, it turned out that Joseph had been playing a sinister game. He would often ask Tim about the progress of the case, pretending to show concern, while secretly trying to gather information and avoid suspicion. Joseph would ask about new leads and news, but Tim had no idea that the killer was standing right in front of him. Even today, Tim does not believe that the person he trusted most was actually his mother's killer. In fact, he says he had the killer's picture in his home for years without ever suspecting anything. Jeff, still grieving, often wonders how life would be different if Linda were still alive. Despite the traumatic experience, Tim and Jeff have remained very close. They often visit their mother's grave together, and Jeff never fails to light a candle on the anniversary of her death.